Tonight, the crypto conspiracy, how Donald Trump and Elon Musk are using manufactured crises, political appointments, and social media to drive Bitcoin prices up to record highs and to profit from it all. That's tonight on Narativ. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Narativ. This is the very iconic moment we all remember about Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter. A much younger-looking Musk carrying a kitchen sink into Twitter headquarters and declaring, "Let that sink in." But the actual story of how Elon Musk bought Twitter began much earlier. In late 2021, Russian President Vladimir Putin reached out to Elon Musk. It was soon after that initial Putin contact that Musk quietly began to purchase shares of Twitter. The conventional wisdom around Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter is that it was an eccentric move by one very eccentric billionaire, Elon Musk. But that's not the case at all. It was actually bankrolled by an unprecedented alliance of anti-democratic forces. To be fair, 50% of the money that went to buy Twitter came from Elon Musk himself, backed by Tesla shares used as collateral. But the rest of it came from a motley crew of funds and national interest sources that were really anti-democratic in nature. $2 billion from the Saudi Prince Al Walid Fund, $500 million from Binance, that's a Chinese crypto firm, $375 million from Qatar. Dig a little further and you'll find companies that are also connected directly to the Kremlin. So companies like Vi Capital, which is operating out of the UAE these days, but is actually linked to the Russian tech investor Yuri Milner. And two New York-based firms with ties to Russian oligarchs are also among the investors. Now, of course, Vladimir Putin has been acting as the captain of this team of anti-democratic, authoritarian leaders that have been determined to bring down democracy. And it's this team which ultimately funded the purchase of Twitter. It's quite ironic that you've got these authoritarian interests coming together under the banner of free speech, only they don't have any free speech at home at all.
In a tweet, Musk wrote, "Entering Twitter HQ, let that sink in." And right there, you can see him walking into Twitter headquarters, smiling, holding a large sink. Musk also changed his Twitter bio description to read Chief Twit.
X, formerly Twitter, has lost 60% of its value since that day that Elon Musk bought Twitter. That's $25 billion gone, or you might say down the sink. As it turns out, many of those investors have been wanting their money back. Fidelity, the insurance company, had to write down $17 billion alone in losses just last year. Musk is facing pressure from angry Twitter investors who want their money back. But there's also Russian backers who expect influence in the new Trump administration and hope that Elon Musk can deliver that. Also, banks are very seriously worried about their loans to Elon Musk. And Tesla shareholders are watching their stocks swing with every Musk tweet. None of it is making anybody feel very comfortable. We know that Elon Musk used a lot of Tesla stock in order to fund the purchase of Twitter. It was used as collateral in order to raise the loans he needed to buy Twitter. But there's another big factor weighing on Tesla's balance sheet, and that is a significant amount of Bitcoin that it holds. In fact, Tesla has 10,000 Bitcoin and SpaceX has 8,000 Bitcoins on its balance sheet. So if the price of Bitcoin collapses, it would be game over for Musk and all his three companies. The same is also likely true for many of the key investors in Twitter/X. Those Russian, Chinese, Saudi Arabian companies all have very heavy Bitcoin investments. And perhaps this is the key reason why Elon Musk became such a big proponent of Donald Trump. Before the election of Donald Trump, when Bitcoin was trading at $70,000 a Bitcoin. Now take a look at what happens after the election. On November 5th, Trump wins the election. Within a week, the price of Bitcoin jumps about $20,000. You can see it here. The first red circle you see on the chart there, that's Trump's election. And then you could see this incredible surge that follows until the end of November, early December. And then the line begins to flatten out as we approach December. That's when Trump jumps back into the marketplace by making several big announcements. He says that he's going to elect David Sachs as the crypto czar. There isn't always a crypto czar, but in the Trump administration, there will be a crypto czar. And that announcement that David Sachs will be that person sends shockwaves through the entire Bitcoin community because it is exactly a signal that they're looking for, that the Trump administration will be very crypto friendly. And what follows over the next few days is several announcements, which proves exactly that, how pro-crypto Trump will be. In fact, the day after he announced Sachs's appointment, he puts out this on Truth Social. This is from Donald Trump. Congratulations, Bitcoiners. You are welcome. Then on December 7th, Trump announces plans to recognize cryptocurrency as a commodity, not a security. That's a big regulatory change that people were looking for in the marketplace because it means that institutional investors could invest in crypto. Each announcement is amplified on X, obviously. Each amplification drives the prices even higher. And by December 15th or so, you get that Bitcoin peak price of $108,000. If you're lucky enough to own some Bitcoin, you've done really well since Trump's election because you've seen the price surge by about 50%. Let's take that 50% as a benchmark because in fact it is a little higher today, but Tesla's Bitcoin value has increased by $318 million. SpaceX has gained a value of $315 million. Musk's personal crypto portfolio, this is the crypto that he owns by himself, includes Ethereum and Dogecoin and other Bitcoin. So they would have seen a similar jump, about 50% gain. And this is where it gets really troubling. Donald Trump also stands to profit from all these cryptocurrency announcements. You may recall he established something called World Liberty Financial, and it was launched just before these announcements went public. The website of World Liberty Financial says it's inspired by Donald Trump. It doesn't say it is Donald Trump, but you can bet that every one of these tokens that this particular website is going to sell will benefit Trump and his family. Every time the price of Bitcoin goes up, his profits from World Liberty Financial go up as well. When the price increases from $70,000 a Bitcoin to $108,000 a Bitcoin, his profit margin at World Liberty Financial also increases by 50%. You should also take into account Truth Social's SPAC merger, which is now worth many billions of dollars. Trump owns about 78 million shares in the Trump Media Technology Group. That's the company, it's a SPAC that owns Truth Social. Every time the price of Bitcoin goes up, so does the value of Truth Social. The market has priced the SPAC directly related to the price of Bitcoin. So now you can see that Elon Musk and Donald Trump stand to make a big fortune off the increases in Bitcoin, which is directly related to the cryptocurrency policies that Trump intends to implement in the next administration. In many ways, this creates the perfect profit cycle. Trump announces crypto-friendly policies, the Bitcoin price surges, so do the valuations of Liberty Financial and Truth Social as their stock price rises. Then he announces David Sachs as a crypto czar. Both Trump and Elon Musk are positioned well as they have a key ally to help implement these market-moving decisions. The scale of this scheme is really quite staggering. It generates billions of dollars in paper wealth for him, for Elon Musk, and the Silicon Valley oligarchy of America. These tech boy billionaires are all heavily invested in Bitcoin. This really isn't about market gains anymore or acceptance of a new currency. This is about the capture of presidential power to create personal profit. Joining me now is Olga Lautman, a senior fellow at the Center for European Policy Analysis, and she's also the owner and author of Unmasking Russia, the successful Substack blog that you should all be subscribing to. Olga, my report tonight about cryptocurrency and the involvement of players like David Sachs, Elon Musk, and Donald Trump driving up crypto prices using mechanisms we know from other authoritarian rules. It's maybe not surprising, but it is certainly shocking to see it's happening in the United States. You've had your encounters with David Sachs and others. Tell me a little bit more about your experiences with him.
So it's actually very interesting because he's coming in as the crypto czar, and Trump now has fully endorsed crypto. And you see Silicon Valley lining up behind Trump with this crypto. And what's interesting is that a lot of these, most vocal supporters who are now basically moving in to the Trump regime, with Musk even moving into the White House, have been spewing Kremlin propaganda. David Sachs is a perfect example. I didn't know who he was prior to 2022. I started seeing him popping up in my feed, basically spewing Kremlin propaganda against Ukraine. This was direct Kremlin propaganda that Ukrainians are Nazis, that Ukraine isn't a country, that Russia is doing its rightful thing to protect Russian citizens. Everything the Kremlin was saying domestically, he was repeating here. So I checked his Twitter. Prior to January 2022, he never even made a mention of Ukraine. Zero. That word never came up. And then suddenly, January 2022, he puts out, tweets defending Russia when there were rumors and chatter about a potential full-scale invasion. By February, he goes full-scale Kremlin propagandist, and he hasn't stopped since. And I mean, literally for 2 years, for an American to sit morning through night putting out propaganda that matches identically to what Russia's pushing domestically across Europe and in the US, I mean, there had to be something more to the story. And I remember asking him, I got into several fights with him on Twitter over this. Never got an answer. I talk about Russia and Ukraine because these are my countries. If I wake up tomorrow and start spouting propaganda about Peru, that has absolutely nothing to do with me, and this is what I put my focus on from morning to night, then there's something questionable. And that's the same questions I have for him. All these crypto dudes who basically spent the past few years, Elon was doing the same thing. The amount of insane Kremlin disinformation he was putting out about Ukraine, it was incredible. Besides the fact that we've already talked in the show of him sabotaging Starlink for critical Ukrainian missions starting in 2022. So now all these people suddenly surrounded themselves around Trump and are obviously have a field in, focus with crypto. So
That's
I'm
really
very
interesting.
curious that intersection of Russia, crypto, propaganda, disinformation,
We've seen it all before. It's interesting that within a month of Trump appointing Sachs as the crypto czar, the price went to its highest point in its history of Bitcoin. It reached $108,000 per Bitcoin, which is astronomical. It's settled a little bit, but you can tell that the market is being driven up because they know that David Sachs is going to give the crypto world everything they want, a complete free, deregulated market for them to do what they need to do. And that is what is also driving Elon Musk's support of AFD, Elon Musk's support of the conservatives here in Canada, and the attacks on Starmer and the Labour government in the UK is that those more left-leaning governments are not so in on crypto, where AFD, the Conservative Party, and the GOP are very in on crypto because it suits their interests and their pockets are lined with all sorts of corruption. What we're seeing is these attacks on democracy are really there to support the climb of crypto, which is so cynical and disgusting.
Yeah, I don't know as much about crypto. I'm not a crypto expert, but I do know that crypto has been used to move money for funding Russia for their genocidal war in Ukraine. Russia's organized crime members make payments and move money through crypto. All the Russian hackers who have seized operations inside of U.S. like Colonial Pipeline and others, if I remember correctly, they were paid ransom through crypto. So you see a lot of the ransom being paid in crypto. For instance, even the October 7th Hamas attack, Russia has a crypto exchange, Garantex, that was sanctioned by the United States. Hamas moved money through Garantex, and a good portion of that money was used to fund the October 7th attack. Crypto is basically a new form of money laundering where it's untraceable and you can move money around. You could, pay for drug trafficking, for pretty much everything that organized crime does. You can pay NGOs in the West to carry out malign influence operations for state actors.
Even Telegram has been used to hire people to do terror attacks in countries that they...
Across Europe to case out U.S. military installations, critical infrastructure in Germany, in UK, Poland, Finland. I mean, the whole Europe is under attack by Russia. They've carried out sabotage operations, and assassinations are being paid by crypto. Because on Telegram, they were attempting to hire, Russia was attempting to hire, people to assassin people in Europe that, Russia wants gone. So, I mean, this, whole convergence between crypto, and then you have here the crypto czar, and, these people who happen to be cheerleaders of the, Russia's genocidal war in Ukraine, after never mentioning. I understand if you had policy opinions, for decades or what. I mean, if you've never uttered the word Ukraine until January 2022, what happened that suddenly you start putting 10, 15, 20 posts a day mirroring Russia's disinformation domestically and across Europe?
And that timeline is so important because right there in the start of January 2022 is when Putin and Musk apparently had their connections in late 21 and going to 22. And soon after that, we saw Elon Musk transform into a real Kremlin propagandist. Now, tomorrow night, you and I have a very special event that we're doing for our premium subscribers to our Substacks and our newsletter. And it's about preparing for what is going to be quite something. I mean, there is an incoming administration here, which is unlike anything Americans have ever witnessed. It is going to be authoritarian in nature in a way that none of us can ever imagine, unless you've lived through it, as some of us have in authoritarian states. There's a lot to think about, a lot to prepare for, whether it's in terms of your own safety and security, what might be coming down the line from this administration, and what you can do to personally prepare, whether you're a journalist or a politician. There's certainly some things that you should be doing to prepare for this new reality that we're in. And if you're just an ordinary citizen concerned about the way things are going, it'll be an eye-opening Zoom call where we'll have a frank, open conversation about what might be coming and how to prepare. What are you hoping to share with everyone tomorrow, and what are your hopes for tomorrow?
My biggest hopes are to warn people what is coming. Trump is using identical tactics to Putin. He would turn the United States into a Russia because he wants to organize agencies to go after and silence opposition. But my biggest points I want to push for tomorrow is the resistance part. Resisting doesn't mean you have to sacrifice your whole life to fight this regime. It could be the smallest things, from joining your local communities to using art, whatever your expertise and hobbies are. I want people to change the mind frame of resisting. People sometimes think that means, planning the biggest, million-man march, where it could be small things. The whole point is for it to be consistent. So that's the biggest thing, to give pointers on how to push back, because we will have to push back.
But also always peaceful and careful, because this administration is looking for opportunities to suppress people in every way, and reacting just for reaction is never really the right way when you're dealing with authoritarian states.
We'll do so much to bring shock and awe in order to try to get people to react violently, to cross the line so they can enforce even stricter policies. So that's why people need to remain their cool. But anyway, that will be the discussion tomorrow. For anyone who's available, please join us.
Substack or at narativ.org, to the narativ.org newsletter. If you're not yet a paid subscriber, this is a great opportunity to become a paid subscriber to either or both newsletters. If you are a paid subscriber, you're already invited, and we'll send you the link tomorrow morning. There is a registration form on our Olga Substack and narativ.org. It'll be great if you are hoping to attend, that you fill in that form by tomorrow morning so we have a good idea of how many people are joining us. Space is limited, but if you're not yet a subscriber, there's time for you to still subscribe and join by filling in that form. We certainly hope as many of you will join us tomorrow night at 8 p.m. on this special Zoom called Surviving the Trump Administration, the Essential Guide. It'll be with Olga and me tomorrow night. And thank you so much, Olga. Thanks for being here tonight. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
I wish we could freeze this week and not move forward.
It's almost guaranteed that what happens from next week onwards is going to be very, very different than any reality that we've had up until now. That's for sure.
One day, you'll tell the story of autocrats, crooks, and kings. who came for our freedom. A story of citizens who stood up to tyranny and won. The people prevailed and renewed an old vow to a more perfect union. And that was just the beginning. The story continues. Narativ, where truth lives.
When Elon Musk took over, everything changed. What started as a social media company became something much darker.
Those are the words of a former junior designer and programmer at Elon Musk's X, a whistleblower who has come forward at great personal risk to reveal the inner workings of what was once known as Twitter. In an anonymous post on Substack, the whistleblower is making some stunning accusations about her former boss. She claims that Elon Musk turned Twitter into a propaganda machine and used it to influence the 2024 elections by creating and amplifying fake news to support extreme right-wing views and help elect Donald Trump.
I was part of a team that was directly ordered to manipulate Twitter's systems to influence the 2024 U.S. presidential election. It wasn't subtle, and it wasn't ethical.
In the first episode of our Crypto Conspiracy series, we revealed how Musk and Trump plotted to exploit the incoming president's powers in order to drive up the price of Bitcoin for their own personal profit. Within days of our initial broadcast, we saw just how accurate our reporting was.
The reign of terror against crypto is over.
And now, after using his Trump brand to sell everything from steaks and vodka to sneakers and Bibles, the president promoting his company's newly launched Trump meme coin.
I don't know much about it other than I launched it. I heard it was very successful.
At one point, the Trump coin rocketing from $6.50 to more than $72. Today, trading closer to $45 a coin. A similar coin, named for Melania, launched just yesterday.
What we didn't fully understand at the time, and what we now know, is the role that Twitter played in laying the groundwork for Trump's election and the subsequent spike in crypto prices. Tonight, in our second part of Crypto Conspiracy, we'll zoom in on a critical 3-week which saw Bitcoin prices leap 50%, from $70,000 a Bitcoin to well over $100,000. And we'll reveal how Donald Trump's politics and Elon Musk's X helped make those prices a reality.
Can now confirm through police sources that the CEO of United Healthcare, Brian Thompson, was fatally shot just outside the Hilton Hotel in Midtown Manhattan, New York City this morning.
On December 4th at 6:44 a.m. in New York's Midtown, the CEO of United Healthcare was gunned down. The story and the ensuing manhunt became the dominant news story for a week, eclipsing all other reports. It received significant attention on social media, particularly on X, But while America was transfixed with the manhunt, something else was happening. Just hours after the shooting, Donald Trump announced his pick for the SEC chairman, Paul Atkins, a pro-crypto advocate. Early the next morning, on December 5th, Bitcoin had approached $100,000. Then came a statement from Russian President Vladimir Putin, announcing his intention to expand Russia's crypto mining sector. Finally, Trump named David Sachs as America's first crypto czar. Now, the appointment of David Sachs as a crypto czar was always going to be controversial. After all, he's one of the PayPal mafia and a very close friend of Elon Musk. But because the attention of the news media was so focused on the other big business story of the day, Brian Thompson's assassination, barely anyone paid attention.
I'm writing this with a heavy heart and no small amount of fear. As a former ex, formerly Twitter employee on an H-1B visa, I can't reveal my identity without risking everything. But I can't stay silent any longer about what I saw and was made to do.
According to our whistleblower, when Elon Musk took over Twitter, it was transformed. What started as a social media company became something much darker. X became more than a platform. It was weaponized. It was used not just to share information, but to shape it.
Perhaps the most unethical part was how we manufactured news stories. One team would write completely fake articles, while another team would artificially boost their engagement metrics to make them go viral. We specifically targeted certain groups of people, knowing exactly how to manipulate their views and emotions. Elon Musk himself was deeply involved in these decisions, often joking about being Black Hat MAGA.
So let's take a look at the extraordinary news events that happened in December into January. The Mangione arrest happened on December 9th, so you can see how that story straddled almost a week of news content. Then on January the 1st, we had the New Orleans attack and the Cybertruck explosion outside a Trump hotel in Las Vegas.
I just heard a boom.
Oh my God. I heard that boom too, but I didn't know it was actually outside. I thought it was a person in the hallway. Holy shit.
What's very interesting about the Cybertruck attack is that Elon Musk became the primary source of information. Well ahead of law enforcement officials, he was able to tweet, for example, that we have now confirmed the explosion was caused by a very large fireworks and or a bomb carried in the bed of a rented Cybertruck, unrelated to the vehicle itself. That's very good for the Tesla brand, of course. And then it says all vehicle telemetry was positive at the time of the explosion. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but it clearly is saying that the truck was in good condition when it exploded. And here's Musk again saying that it's actually the Cybertruck that thwarted the terrorist attack because it contained the explosion and directed the blast upwards. Not even the glass door of the Trump lobby were broken. I'll share one other quick thing about the Cybertruck, and then we'll move on to another news story. Before the Cybertruck explosion took place, Elon Musk saying, Cybertruck looks like the future. And then you see a post by Tesla King, and it says, this Cybertruck is on fire, using the emoji for fire.
That's a lot of smoke.
That's another one I heard.
It was like a boom, boom, boom.
All right, let's get back to our list of news stories now that broke since November the 5th. You can see the Cybertruck explosion there. And you can also imagine what we're about to tell you about the LA wildfires.
Tesla CEO Elon Musk is donating Cybertrucks to the recovery efforts. Musk says they've outfitted the battery-powered trucks with his satellite internet service.
There's one post from Ben Longmire, which we believe works for Starlink. He says, with 400 Starlink direct-to-call sats, you can now send a text message from your phone via satellite within seconds. Now, how did this technology come to the forefront? Well, on the right-hand side there, you see Telstra in Australia. We're excited to announce a new collaboration with SpaceX's Starlink to bring satellite to mobile text messaging to our customers in Australia. This was posted January the 8th. Starlink and SpaceX had the impeccable vision. They should collaborate with a cell phone company for just these kinds of use cases on the day that the fires become a big national news story. And that's not all, because the Tesla owners Silicon Valley also want to tell us that Starlink is one of the most vital and important inventions of our lifetime. The only reason you're able to see us right now is because of Starlink, says this TV reporter. There's absolutely no self-service at all in this whole area.
Musk reshared an AI-generated video describing his donations on X, making the claim he is saving thousands of lives in Los Angeles.
I want to show you something pretty interesting that happens when we superimpose all those news stories with X's to show where Elon Musk or X or Twitter played a big role in those stories. And we can see that everything from the Trump election win on November 5th all the way to the LA wildfires and the support of the neo-Nazi AFD and the attacks on the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Each one of those major news stories that happened in December all the way into January involved Elon Musk in some way or another. Some of them, he was just inserting himself into the narrative. Remember when he told everybody that the New Orleans attack was actually linked somehow to the Cybertruck explosion? Well, it wasn't, but he inserted himself into the narratives and made himself part of that story. Now watch what happens when we superimpose the Bitcoin price. That's the red line. You see the graph in the red line over these news stories. You can see this as these news stories were happening and much of the news media was obsessively covering all these major events. Bitcoin kept climbing all the way to its peak of 108,000 just before January the 1st. And it sort of stayed there. It even peaked again above 100 in early January. It's true that in the world of cryptocurrency and in the world of Bitcoin, Elon Musk has a very unique standing. There's even a term for it. It's called Elonomics, and it's been going on for a couple of years now. And it really means that whatever Elon Musk tweets has the potential to move the Bitcoin prices, has the potential to move cryptocurrency prices across the board. And it's a special power that's really attributed to only him. There is no other person who seems to have such a big control over the Bitcoin prices or the crypto prices moving just because of something he says. And I'm told by people in the crypto space that there are 3 other ways in which the Bitcoin price could go up or could go down. And they are these: structural, which means if a government, say the government of Canada or the government of Germany, decide to back cryptocurrency and deregulate Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, that can really sway the market. In the same way, in the United States, when Donald Trump announced that he was going to accept cryptocurrency, that he was going to make it the crypto capital of the world, that really helped boost the price of Bitcoin. And we saw it shoot up from $70,000 to $100,000 a Bitcoin. Why is that happening? It's happening because there is an acceptance of crypto in the United States. That obviously helps the price. Similarly, if you go to Canada, Germany, or Great Britain, and any of those countries decide to deregulate cryptocurrency, you'll also see the price of Bitcoin shoot up. Those are the 3 countries that Elon Musk has also been mentioning repeatedly on Twitter or on X, supporting the downfall of Justin Trudeau in Canada, supporting the neo-Nazi right-wing AFD in Germany, and criticizing the current Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, in the UK. Those 3 parties have different views on crypto. The AFD is very much in favor of crypto and deregulation. That's why Elon Musk is supporting them. Justin Trudeau's Liberals in Canada and the party of Keir Starmer in the UK are more skeptical about cryptocurrency. And that is why Elon Musk has been targeting them. It is, in fact, very important to watch what Elon Musk tweets because it can cause fundamental shifts in the politics of those countries. And that can also create a structural difference for Bitcoin and cryptocurrency by making it more accepted around the world, which is very important to the cryptocurrency holders. There's also this notion of a chaos ladder. There is a feeling that the more chaos the world is, the less trust there is in the existing regulators, in the existing financial systems in the world. So the more chaos there is, the more planes that are blowing up, the more natural disasters there appear to happen, the more terror attacks happen. All those things tend to push a lot of money into crypto because there's a need for something that's an alternative to the existing financial systems when we see so much chaos in the world. I call it the chaos ladder because it comes from that great line by Littlefinger in the Game of Thrones where he says, chaos is a ladder. And indeed, for people who are supporters of crypto and of Bitcoin, climbing up this ladder every time there's chaos in the world is a way of ensuring that the price of crypto keeps rising, the price of Bitcoin goes up. That's why, again, when Elon Musk is amplifying certain stories, he holds a unique power, not only because it's Elonomics, but also because he's heightening the sense of chaos, heightening the sense of we don't know what's going on, that pushes a lot of people into the crypto space as an alternative to the existing dollar and other financial systems. Finally, the other thing that really pushes Bitcoin prices up is if there is a surge up or down in Bitcoin prices. So anytime there's momentum in the market, as we saw in the crypto markets in December, and right now, in fact, you can see that those big shifts are being followed by other investors piling on in one direction or another. So those are the four factors that you really have to consider when you're looking at how crypto prices and Bitcoin prices go up. Number one is Elonomics. What Elon Musk tweets really matters to the Bitcoin price. The second is if there are structural changes. In other words, if the world's economies, if the world's great powers adopt cryptocurrency and deregulate Bitcoin, that's a good thing. It increases the price of crypto and Bitcoin if you're a Bitcoin investor. The third thing is this notion of a chaos ladder. The more chaos there is, the more uncertainty there is in the world, whether it's terror attacks, natural disasters, or other events, it tends to pile people into the crypto market because they're looking for a safe haven away from traditional financial structures like the dollar or other systems. And finally, there's this idea of the market moves. When there's a big shift in the market, other investors tend to follow it. That's the same for any big market with its cryptocurrencies or stock prices. So keep all that in mind. And let's take a look at those news stories we just talked about. Let's start with the CEO assassination. We know when we talk about Elonomics, we talk about was X amplifying a story, or was Elon Musk involved in a story by tweeting a lot about a certain factor in that story? And with the CEO assassination, we know that the whole idea of Mangione being some sort of everyday hero, that came really from X. It became a big story, and X really amplified that narrative during that period of time. Was it structural? We know that it was used in many ways as a distraction to keep people away from paying too much attention to what was happening with Donald Trump's appointment of David Sachs, the SEC chair, or the subsequent boom that happened in the crypto prices surging up to 100,000. So we're going to say, yes, there was a structural motive behind all of that. Was it chaos ladder? By chaos ladder, we mean, was it perceived in the minds of the American public as part of the chaos that's happening in the world? And therefore, would they have retreated into cryptocurrency as a safer idea? Absolutely. When you've got a CEO of an insurance company being gunned down, and of course, everything that insurance companies represent to the system that is the financial system in the United States and the world right now. Well, this was a real hit, and therefore really a chaos ladder moment, a chaos ladder story, and maybe help push people into crypto just because it represented so much chaos to the existing system. And of course, we know there were massive market moves at around that time, up 50%. We don't know which of these categories maybe pushed it up higher, but we certainly know that it moved up. Cybertruck. This is the explosion of a Cybertruck outside a Trump hotel in Vegas. Was there Elonomics involved? In other words, was Elon tweeting about this, or was it amplified? Absolutely. It was a big story, January the 1st. Elon was talking about it all day long and was certainly amplified. The visuals went everywhere. Was it structural in tone? I don't know. We couldn't quite figure out if this had an impact about whether cryptocurrency would become more accepted or not, but it certainly added to the chaos ladder. We know that there was a terror attack that day in New Orleans. We know that the Cybertruck itself exploding was viewed as a disruptive kind of event, a chaotic event. The fact that Musk tried to connect those two events is really interesting because he was trying to connect it to a sort of a terror spate. And as we know, terror is a big indicator of this chaos ladder. So in other words, if people suspect terror, they're more likely to look for a new financial vehicle because they are beginning to distrust the existing financial vehicles. So yes, was there market moves on that day? There were absolutely market moves. Into January, we saw a lot of increase into the crypto market, it peaking again above 100 and then some. The LA wildfires, absolutely, Elonomics was a big part of it. It became a big story on Twitter, but it also involved Elon inserting himself into the story at various points. Was it structural? It certainly was targeted at Democrats. If you recall, the whole thing was about how Newsom and these DEI hires and all these people were incompetent, incapable. So by signaling that, what it's telling the market is the old way, the old financial systems don't work. Retreat into crypto or look for an alternative by going into crypto. So that's possibly structural by harming the Democrats who are less in favor of crypto, but also definitely part of the chaos ladder because of the fires and the devastation. All of these things had market moves attached to it, all of it related to crypto. But as an overall theme, what you can see here is that the amount of attention that Elon Musk and X and others are pouring into certain stories, that's how you know if the crypto price is going up. And not only is it the amount of attention that they're pouring into it, are those chaotic stories, or are they stories that are changing the acceptance of crypto around the world? We see that with the support of the neo-Nazi party in Germany, the AfD. But that is a party that is in favor of crypto. Therefore, Elon is supporting that party. The opposition there, the leadership as it is right now under Schultz, they're a little bit more skeptical. And that skepticism is what is keeping people from jumping into crypto. But if the AfD wins, suddenly there'll be greater structural acceptance in Germany and the AfD will find support there. All of it is giving you a sense of chaos in the system. We're seeing it in the news again today. We're not saying these news events are created by any of these people on purpose. We are not saying that at all. But we're looking at the way these stories are covered, amplified, and where Elon Musk positions himself in those stories. Those all become very important. Maybe it's through this crypto lens that we can really start to understand what Elon Musk has been doing in the public, whether it's the night before the inauguration with his gesture or salute, call it what you will, amplifying the chaos, making it even crazier for people to understand what's going on. Is that really a way to drive people into cryptocurrency by creating this notion of chaos and lack of control in the system? It's all quite likely that that is in fact what is driving much of what's going on. I'm glad we've been able to bring you this very different perspective on what is going on right now here on Narativ tonight. And as we did in the first episode of Crypto Conspiracy, we were well ahead of all the other media outlets to report what an important story the crypto market was. And we thank Rachel Maddow, we thank The Atlantic, all the others that have since jumped on the story, because it is a very important story. And I hope other journalists, other reporters continue to stay focused on it. That's because David Sachs is right now in the White House. He has a team there. He's the crypto czar, and he's working his magic. He's trying to change the regulations so that cryptocurrency is no longer considered a speculative investment, but is rather considered a commodity like every other investment. That is very, very difficult for anyone to reverse once it's happened. So, and in the meantime, it's also important to keep an eye out for what might be a distracting story. Not necessarily the event itself, but the way stories are being amplified on social media, how certain protagonists are pushing stories, are making them bigger than they might be. It's important to stay focused on all the news, stay focused on all the stuff that's going on behind the scenes, on the hearings that maybe people don't want you to watch, and as well, stay focused on the crypto market, because there is a huge push to have that deregulated. So that's this week's episode of the Crypto Conspiracy. Next time, we're going to delve into what the whistleblower was saying about all the foreign interference that was being allowed on X by Elon Musk. What exactly was that about? Who did they allow in? And what does that mean for the election results of 2024? We'll reveal all of that next time on Narativ. Thank you for being here on the Crypto Conspiracy, and we'll be back with part 3.
One day, you'll tell the story of autocrats, crooks, and kings who came for our freedom. A story of citizens who stood up to tyranny and won. The people prevailed and renewed an old vow to a more perfect union. And that was just the beginning. The story continues. Narrative, where truth lives.
Breaking news tonight on Narrative. Donald Trump's shocking 90-minute phone call with Vladimir Putin, surrendering America to our greatest foe. That's the story tonight on Narrative. It only took 23 days, but Donald Trump revealed his true colors today by capitulating to Russian President Vladimir Putin, America's longtime adversary. It all happened in a matter of hours. At 11 a.m., Tulsi Gabbard, who is known for her Kremlin ties, was appointed to be the Director of National Intelligence. An hour later, at noon, America executed a baffling prisoner exchange, handing over Alexander Vinnik, who's a key player in Russia's 2016 interference campaign, in return for former teacher Mark Fogel, who was being held by the Russians. Minutes later, Trump and Putin held a 90-minute phone call. It's their first since Trump's second term began. They discussed what they called a peace plan for Ukraine. But notably absent was Ukraine's president and America's ally, Volodymyr Zelensky. Putin and Trump also discussed Middle East peace and artificial intelligence, as if this was just an ordinary summit between two key allies. And it ended with the niceties we normally do reserve for our closest allies. Trump invited Putin to Washington, and Putin invited Trump to Moscow. Forgotten were 8 years of vicious election interference in our democracy. By the time Trump sat down for lunch, the world had been reshaped in Vladimir Putin's image. And not for nothing. Tonight on Narrative will also reveal the stunning amount of money that Donald Trump made from those meme coins he sold just before he took office. That's all coming up tonight on Narrative. Joining me tonight is Olga Lautman, our very special regular guest on all things Ukraine and Russia. She's, of course, the author and editor of the Substack Unmasking Russia. She joins us tonight because this is a huge, big story. There's no underlining how big the story is. It's probably the biggest shift in global relations since World War II.
Everything that happened today was very predictable. I wrote about it and have been advocating for Europe to take the lead because I knew that under Trump, U.S. will betray Ukraine. We saw from the first term, and even for decades prior, that Trump's loyalty lies with Russia. Nothing that happened today was unpredictable. It's infuriating. This is where we are now. The United States, that was the leader of the free world, is now aligning with all the axis of evil, basically. And we've spoken before that under Trump, the U.S. will become part of the axis of evil. And for all of Trump's talk about the golden age for America, the only country he's doing the golden age for is China right now, because they're the ones who are powerful enough to step in and use their power to create stronger alliances across the globe. And of course, he's helping with Russia. And if you look at what happened today, this has been a few weeks in the making. Every single step that Trump has taken over the past few weeks is basically checking off a wish list for Russia. Since the Soviet Union, the FBI has been one of Russia's biggest adversaries, and the CIA. Trump is gutting the CIA and the NSA and every intelligence agency in hopes of leaving America defenseless. USAID was America's biggest soft power that defended democracy, provided humanitarian aid across the world, and Elon putting a sledgehammer to USAID. And again, this was on since the Soviet days. This was their wish was to overthrow this agency. The klepto capture that was created after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, they disbanded it. This capture task force was specifically put together to seize assets of Russian oligarchs and businessmen around the globe. Gone. Foreign interference task force, gone. Bribery task force, the unit to monitor election interference and foreign bribe, gone. And then you have today basically Trump attempting to hand Ukraine to Russia. This is basically the past 3 weeks, Trump giving every single thing that Russia wants. He's handed it to them on a gold platter.
Indeed, that is exactly what it looks like. Your comments there are so stark when you listen to that list, because it is so un-American, all those things. We don't do these kinds of things. We don't side with Russia against Ukraine, or one of our key allies. We don't reverse our decisions on so many important criminal cases like the Vinnick case, which we're going to discuss later on, but also the dismantling of these prized institutions that America has, from the CIA to the FBI, Justice Department to the USAID. These are important organizations that have held the American flag up high over the last 50, 60, 70 years. And now just handing them off to Russia in this way, it's almost waving a flag of surrender. Be honest, it looks like that.
Absolutely. And for people who question why is the U.S. providing this humanitarian aid and medicine, Americans need to realize that these packages are all marks from the American people. These are countries that will fall under Russia's or China's influence, and instead are looking up to the U.S. for helping them and grateful to the American people. And then I forgot to add one more, one of the most important on the checklist, if you would think the others aren't as, and that is threatening to attack NATO allies, the so-called axis of evil, not North Korea. He is threatening to invade Canada, a NATO ally, threatening to invade Greenland, a NATO ally. So you have him on top of it, setting the stage where Europeans have to actually figure out whether they need to send troops to Greenland to prevent an invasion from the United States. Are you kidding me? This is what the Soviets wanted. NATO was created post-World War II to keep communism at bay and prevent it from spreading and protect sovereign territories across Europe. And this is what he is doing. He's picking a fight from day one with our NATO allies. And there's a strategic reason. It's not because he just feels like saying, I want Canada. This is because he's laying the groundwork to leave NATO one way or another. Either officially exit it through congressional approval or to just defund it to a point that the U.S. will become irrelevant.
The U.S. may become irrelevant, or this new powerhouse combination of China, Russia, and America. Now, that is a formidable combination of powers that the rest of the world does not really have the firepower to stand up against. It seems very hard to imagine Europe or Africa or Australia or Canada or any of these other countries left over to put up anything formidable against this powerhouse alliance that is being formed by the alliance between Putin, Xi, and it seems Trump. fact that we're looking at is that you can deny it, you can pretend it's not happening, but just look at the negotiations over Ukraine with Putin today. Basically, to negotiate with Putin before talking to the Ukrainians about what they want is treasonous in many ways. It just seems wrong in every possible way.
It started earlier before that, where the so-called defense secretary of the United States basically went to Europe to say, one, that Ukraine is not getting its territory back. Two, Ukraine is not going to see NATO. Three, the U.S. has its own, quote, unquote, war on the border, which is complete bullshit. So U.S. will not be participating in European security, defense of European security. And four, that if Europe does send a peacekeeping force, that it cannot be done under the NATO umbrella because it cannot trigger Article 5. So you started with this, and actually you started yesterday because I knew something had taken place yesterday when Trump announced the release of American Mark Fogel, and he kept intertwining it with Ukraine. And I'm like, is Ukraine the one who was being sacrificed for a release of an American? Apparently, because then today you saw American from Belarus, which is Russia's puppet, being released. So it started yesterday. First of all, there's absolutely should not be any crossover between the release of an American that Russia took hostage with what is happening to Ukraine, where Russia is invading a sovereign territory with the intention to commit genocide. They clearly have stated it. I can't even tell you how many times. This is all they discuss on Russian TV. Until all Ukrainian biological matter is gone, we will not stop. So those two issues have nothing to do with each other. And then it led to today, the Hague says, basically putting out the U.S. policy for the world to see. This is not Fox News where he's just spewing some propaganda. He was sitting in Europe repeating this Russian propaganda. And not only repeating it, but taking steps to back it, basically saying this is the new U.S. policy. And then then came the call with Putin. And basically the fact that Trump basically continues to see, which I'm not shocked. I mean, I'm shocked that he's not blaming Ukraine for Russia invading Ukraine. But the fact that he continues to say, from a U.S. position, that there's so much death and both countries are participating, and that he discussed with Putin how this war started. Well, it started because Russia crossed borders into a sovereign country. This is how it started. Any American president, the only conversation that should be had is Russia, you see your borders, pack up your shit and go.
Crimes that they are saying happened in the U.S. government are nothing compared to the crimes that Vladimir Putin has instigated against the Ukrainian people. These are horrific war crimes. And now he's being allowed to essentially walk away as a victor in all of this. And not only that, the thing which I find so interesting about the exchange between Fogel and Vinnick is one of the main instruments of power, really, because he was the one who created the currency backbone for Vladimir Putin to start this war with the West. He through his exchanges and his hacking, Vinnick was the one who was able to create a cryptocurrency pipeline for Putin so he could pay all the people involved in 2016 to get Donald Trump elected. And he was, successfully prosecuted in the United States, a huge criminal. This is a massive multi-million-dollar criminal. And today he was just allowed to head back home to Vladimir Putin's arms, who will use him again, no doubt, to do cryptocurrency hacks and all sorts of manipulation around the world against the United States as well. This is not really a fair exchange.
I frankly am shocked that Elon and Trump didn't give them office space and a high-level position in the crypto whatever agency that they're creating and buy him from Russia, which maybe you'll have a joint Russian-U.S. crypto.
They might try it. They've tried weirder things before. Speaking of crypto, we've been covering this a lot on Narativ, and there's some really interesting news that came out just today about who made the money off those Trump meme coins that came out the day before the election, or a couple of days before the election. It just underlines to me how challenging crypto is overall. This is basically a look at how the Trump coin profited different wallets. And basically you had 810,000 wallets losing a combined $2 billion in value, and 31 wallets picking up 680 million, which tells you there's obviously a difference there that goes into all sorts of people's pockets. But the fact that only 31 people basically, or 31 accounts that were early adopters of this Trump meme coin, who were able to buy this Trump meme coin for at 16 cents or at less than that when it was originally released, they were the ones those are the only ones that reaped the rewards. It's always this same thing with Trump and Musk and Putin. They're all the same players. This is a pump and dump scheme, and we're seeing it before our very eyes. And what did the president of the United States get for this? $100 million just on trades. So you've got a pump and dump scheme that's happening in the public right now, with the president of the United States and Elon Musk and David Sachs and all these insiders are making hundreds of millions of dollars. And I bet you Vladimir Putin is making hundreds of millions of dollars in this pump and dump scheme that's basically happening in front of our very eyes. And there's no coverage. People are not really focusing on this major scandal. If any other president in US history had stolen $101 million in a pump and dump scheme, an illegal one, people would be going crazy. But for some reason, we're in a situation now where crypto, which is really something that Vladimir Putin it's the biggest champion of. He's made so much money of crypto, and he's announced a new mining initiative. This is the thing that is going to become the backbone of the US Treasury. This is the thing that is going to make them even wealthier. This is going to take Trump and Musk and Sachs and Putin over the top in terms of wealth, and leave the rest of Americans floundering, or at least holding the bill at the end of it all when it all collapses. This is my personal passion project, but it seems to me unbelievable that this is not getting any coverage and people are just cheering it on.
I absolutely agree. And I understand on X, there's no coverage, but what about the whole damn media? There is legacy media that still exists. And yes, they've written articles about this. I actually have a Trump tyranny tracker to document the erosion of institutions and the power grab. And I think I've already included several stories on these crypto schemes, but this should be a bigger story. And frankly, everything should be a bigger story. And unfortunately, it's being normalized where you now have people even on legacy media sitting and discussing whether there's a separation of powers and should be a separation of powers between the judicial and executive branch. Everything is so upside down right now that it's incredible. Like we all, since the first time we learned U.S. history, that there are these so-called of government. And now you have pundits sitting and saying, why should a judge be able to tell an administration what they can or cannot do? There's so much that is happening, and it's so quick. And with Trump, he uses strategic chaos where he floods the zone with shit. So much information, so many executive orders, so many statements that important things like this crypto go uncovered, and other important aspects go uncovered while the media is focused on, for instance, other statements that he's made, including Gaza. Look, his so-called plan for Gaza is outrageous, but it's not happening today. This is something that will, if he chooses to go through with it, he has to prepare the U.S. military. They have to go in and forcibly remove 2 million Palestinians. This is not happening today. He did announce it, however, when the media finally started dealing with what in the hell is Elon Musk and his unvetted criminal, in some cases, teenagers doing with our data. They're literally stealing and copying every American's data, all our classified intelligence, everything about the U.S. government. They are copying, they're recoding so they can go and alter information. They can put stop payments. So, for instance, Trump at one point says, we're not going to pay out Social Security to New Yorkers. They didn't vote for me. They're able to go click and shut off Social Security payments to New York.
Actually, I think what's going to happen is they're going to take this information that they have on X and out of the social platforms. So there's really a ton of data They're going to start marrying that to the treasury files and the private information that we have there and the medical files that we have in there. And they'll be able to know every aspect of every American's lives completely.
Even worse, their children, because any person who files a tax return has to list their children and social security numbers.
Yes.
This is exposing the children of American people who then, that could be leaked online and used as a basically weapon to threaten opposition figures. And I'm talking about minor kids, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, not obviously teenagers and whatnot. Anyways, the minute the media started dealing with this and actually this was finally a breaking news story for them, Trump threw out the Gaza statement. And immediately, what Elon was doing, but what's happening in our institutions, basically the sledgehammer of U.S. democracy took a backseat, and breaking news, Trump announces he's going to take Gaza and send U.S. military in there. And that's, and this is why your crypto story is not getting attention, because this is where it is. There's so much happening at the same time, and people in media tend to focus on more of the shiny objects instead of these serious things where these people are enriching themselves. And not only that, who are these 31 wallets? That could be...
They're Chinese. A lot of them are Chinese.
Saudis, it could be Russians, it could be foreigners buying the U.S. president after Elon bought the White House.
Exactly what's going on. There was a really interesting story, which also has not received very much attention, about U.S. aid and Elon Musk. And it's something that ties back to something I know you're very passionate about, which is the Starlink modems that were made available to Ukraine. U.S. aid was reportedly investigating Elon Musk for the transfer of some of those U.S. aid paid for Starlinks that were meant to go to Ukraine. Some of them, as you pointed out all the time, went to Russia. And USAID was the agency investigating Elon Musk for that, which explains why he shut it down. And it explains what we're dealing with here. These people are, once they have cryptocurrency regulated and once crypto is the law of the land and the currency of the land, they will become so brutal, because that's the one thing they really want that they don't have yet, is this cryptocurrency normalization. Once they have that, all gloves are off. I don't think they're going to care about anyone's opinions about anything. They're just going to run this as a fiefdom of Putin and Xi's, and that's it. Americans don't realize yet how stark, a difficult and dark a position we're in right now with this takeover of the administration, with this looming crypto normalization, and with these criminals at the helm of the government who are shutting down every independent investigation, every independent investigator, every police officer, FBI officer. They're all being shut down. They're doing that so they can get away with massive crimes after the fact.
Absolutely. And to go back to the Starlink, another story that didn't get attention is why in the hell was a sanctioned oligarch invested in Starlink after he was sanctioned? This is another thing that needs to be looked into, why a Russian oligarch had money invested in Starlink via some front companies after the full-scale invasion. There's a lot that will happen, but ultimately it's up to the people, because they don't care about not the mega base, not the regular American. They don't care. These were all tools to get into the White House and to get to power. Now that they have power, they don't care if Americans are going to pay. They don't care if they collapse the American economy. This is where I'm hopeful, because once this starts hitting home to people, that people will wake up and stand up for their rights. Because it's one thing that we've spent years and years warning about this, and people chose to ignore it and said, oh, they're being hyperbolic, or, oh, it's not that serious. This is America. Everything's normal. It's another thing when people look at their 401k and that thing exists of what it was before. When they go to their daycare center that's funded by one of these U.S. programs, and the daycare center is shut down, and now they have to scramble and figure out how to pay for childcare to get to work. When it starts affecting people personally, and a large swath of America personally, that's where I am still hopeful that Americans will come out and say enough is enough. We're not going to let, a bunch of billionaires steal from us.
Really, now is the time when you think about it. This story does not get any better down the line. They'll keep throwing red herrings into the public space so people can, believe that Trump is trustworthy. But the truth of it is, things can only go downhill from here.
It will, but the problem is that people don't realize how bad it is until it hits their own household. And like I said, when people start experiencing it where, they had a very secure 401k and that's wiped out, when they had a school, that was receiving various programs, and that's all gone, when their daycares are shut down, and when their actual daily lives are affected, that's when people will wake up. And we've been 3 weeks into it. With everything happening, you're already seeing a huge disruption. People angry, but it's just not enough yet. I think, unfortunately, Americans are going to have to feel extreme pain. It'll be up to the people to decide if this is the direction the country wants to go.
And when we look at all that's happened and we look at someone like Tulsi Gabbard now in charge of the National Intelligence Office, she's clearly an affiliate of Vladimir Putin. She's a Russian
asset.
We exposed that way back when she first ran for president in 2016, 2015. There's a problem, and Americans need to realize that when you've got your intelligence agencies, basically the CIA and the other 16 intelligence agencies that exist, are now basically reporting to a Russian asset. You've got Vladimir Putin controlling how we end this war with Ukraine, the Ukrainian war. You've got Elon Musk, who's also a Russian asset, who's controlling the spending and managing all the tax money that Americans pay for every year. Here, they have taken over the United States of America. Russia is in charge. The Kremlin is in charge of America. It's no longer the person sitting in the White House. If there's still a national pride, and there's got to be some of it left, you got to imagine that's really going to make people stand up and pay attention. These moments that we're seeing today, this very clear day today, which is quite historic, where Trump is basically submitting to Putin on every demand, that's a very big day. And people need to mark it and understand that we've elected a president who's basically handed over the reins of this country to our number one adversary.
To put it in a very simple example, because a lot of people are like, okay, so big deal. She is a Russian asset. They might as well have put the head of SVR, which is the Foreign Intelligence Service, into this position. You have Trump threatening to illegally seize Gaza and displace Palestinians. Gaza has always been an issue tied to terrorism. All the terrorist attacks, whether 9/11, and all the attacks across on American interests abroad, came because of ultimately it was Palestine that was the root cause. So you have Trump inflaming all the terrorist groups. You have him putting a sledgehammer through all the U.S. intelligence agencies and law enforcement meant to protect America and American interests abroad and domestic from terrorism. You have to be out of your freaking mind. If there's one country in this world who share intelligence with the United States after Tulsi Gabbard, what she did. And then you have him pissing off our Middle Eastern allies who historically have shared intelligence, including Jordan on 9/11. They're so angry with Trump threatening to turn Gaza into waterfront condos. If they know there's a terrorist plot to blow up Washington, D.C., New York, any state across the United States, they'll be like, oh, let them do it. It's not our issue. We're not sharing this information. He, at the same time, is inflaming terrorism by these comments, destroying every single intelligence agency and putting someone in charge that forget Five Eyes. We're not even going to have one eye. Mm-hmm. No one, as long as Tulsi's in this position, is going to share any intelligence with U.S.
American intelligence is very good, but they certainly don't have the reach that other intelligence agencies have in parts of the world. And
intelligence is a very tricky thing, and America has excellent intelligence, but they do need human sources, which are based in the regions where they're collecting intelligence, and they need to coordinate with U.S. allies, because we might pick up, even by SIGINT or signal intelligence, we might pick up one aspect of it. UK picked up something else, or something else is happening in UK. Australia picked up a third thing. And then when you combine it all together, you can see the plot and disrupt it. And this is our strongest ally, our neighbor. This is what you're doing.
People actually put this in context. The American people are not to blame for this. This is a regime that is going to be very destructive to all Americans, whether they see it now or they don't. It's just the reality of it.
Half of America understands Canada is one of our best friends. Europe is one of our best friends. Half of America did not want this, will not support it, and will push back in every way they can.
Punishing the American people is not the right thing to do, but punishing the regime is the right thing to do in every which way possible. And it is now a regime. We've got a very different American government. We've never seen anything like this. Let's end here, if we can, just talking about people power a little bit. Is that what we're relying on? People actually getting up and into the streets and pushing out this government? Is there anything else that you can imagine that can change the narrative going forward?
It was a simple, sometimes the simplest answers are right in front of us. And in 2016, unfortunately, there was a resistance, but everybody, first it was they relied on Comey, then they relied on Mueller, then they relied on Pelosi, and they're always then Jack Smith. And the problem here is that people are handing away their power for someone else to do something. And now that you have all these people, whether Comey failed us, Mueller failed us, Jack Smith failed us, Merrick Garland failed us, Pelosi failed us, the answer has always been with the people. Any change in America has happened through the people. We've had civil rights movement. That didn't happen because one leader. It happened because the people and a leader fought for these rights. And obviously it wasn't convenient. And you had Martin Luther King assassinated. You had bloody scenes across America. But the bottom line was that the civil rights movement moved the country forward. Women's rights movement, same thing. It was done by the people. Again, you have prominent women leaders, but you could be screaming into the wind. If you don't have people behind you backing you and out there with you, nothing will happen. So basically, it's up to the people. And like I keep repeating, people ask me, oh my God, how long is Trump going to stay? Is he going to leave in 2028? First of all, forget it. If he's a dictator, he's not leaving. But as far as how long he will stay, as long as the people let him stay, they will get away with as much as people allow it to happen. And when people have had enough, then they will come out, not leave the streets and say, enough, we don't want this. This is not who we are. This is not what we want. And that's it. So it's always the people. It's always, and this is around the world and in United States, everything, every great achievement and progress in the United States was made by the people.
And it's going to happen sooner rather than later if it's going to happen, because let's be honest, every day that this continues is another day when Elon Musk can rewire the entire administration. And at the end of the day, I keep going back to crypto because it's so concerning to me that they can take the entire economy. They can steal the entire economy. It's not going to be that hard for them to raise this coin price up so high, replace the American dollars inside the treasury with those Bitcoins and the cryptocurrencies. And then they used to pump and dump schemes. They're going to pump it up and then they'll take all the money and leave the American people holding the can here. This is, I think, the plot that they're inventing.
And this is when American people need to wake up. When they stop getting Medicare and Medicaid, Social Security, their tax returns. And Americans are very good about that because Americans, they don't get infuriated. The bus is not running on schedule because they're used to everything. It's a democracy. We have minus a few kinks here and there and a lot to improve. People like predictability. They like to know that they leave for work and they have their bus that operates properly, their train operates properly, that they drop off their kid at school, the school is operating properly. They need to go to the hospital is open. Once services start getting disrupted, this is when people will wake up.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And things are going to get disrupted quite quickly. I think we can anticipate what's going to happen. It's very important that people start to consider how they're going to respond and when the right time is. Maybe the right time is right now. When you look at the kind of conversations that Putin is having with Trump, the giving away of American power, it's unbelievable to see so much being handed over for nothing. to a person who's really been an incredible tyrant to his own people, and a person who's also committed some of the biggest war crimes in the world against the Ukrainian people. And Ukraine, of course, still fighting this.
The Middle East,
Yeah,
Syrians,
exactly.
you name it. Russia has left massacres across the globe. So everywhere that Russia operates, they leave a trail of atrocities.
And they're
You
after
know.
everyone's human rights, their freedom of speech, their freedom of
course.
association, freedom of religion, freedom of everything, really. These people want you to be subject of their will, and that's what they're intending to create in the United States. Thank you, Olga Lautman, for sharing your passion and your anger. And thank you very much for being here. Tell everyone where they can find you and your excellent Substack.
So I have two Substacks, Unmasking Russia. This is my analysis and where I write about things happening in Russia in comparisons with the U.S. And then Trump Tyranny Tracker is basically a tracker that documents by corruption, power consolidation, rollback of civil human rights, and weaponization of agencies, Imperial Watch, and so forth. It's a very simple daily count of what is happening and why it matters.
It's great. I didn't realize it was a separate Substack. I just keep getting it, and I think it's great as part of what you do.
I want it to be very clean tool where people can say on February 8th, this is what happened.
People can find that at Tyranny Tracker. Is that what it's called?
Yep.
Okay.
From Tyranny Tracker on Substack.
And your other one is called Unmasking Russia. It's Olga Lautman. She's a senior fellow at the Center for European Policy Analysis. Thank you, Olga.
One day, you'll tell the story of autocrats, crooks, and kings who came for our freedom. A story of citizens who stood up to tyranny and won. The people prevailed and renewed an old vow to a more perfect union. And that was just the beginning. The story continues. Narativ, where truth lives.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Narrative. I'm Zev Shalev. Tomorrow, 25 major names in crypto will gather at the White House for a summit focused on establishing a crypto reserve for America. Since Donald Trump's election on November the 5th, cryptocurrency has surged, peaking at over $100,000 a Bitcoin, and primarily benefiting a select few Bitcoin holders, many of whom have ties to Donald Trump. At Narrative, our investigation into what we call the crypto conspiracy has revealed 3 significant pump and dump operations that have enriched insiders like Elon Musk and David Sachs and Donald Trump himself. The first pump and dump occurred on December the 5th. While many of us were distracted by the assassination of the United Health CEO, Donald Trump announced some staggering pro-cryptocurrency regulations And he appointed David Sachs as his crypto czar and Paul Atkins as the chair of the SEC. Those moves allowed Bitcoin to surge from $70,000 a Bitcoin to $108,000 a Bitcoin. The price later dropped to $85,000, but many insiders were able to cash in and make a profit before that drop. Elon Musk's companies, Tesla and SpaceX, gained a staggering $1.3 billion as crypto surged because they have a lot of Bitcoin on their balance sheets. The second pump and dump cycle occurred just before the inauguration, with the launch of the Trump coin and the Melania meme coins. In that case, just 31 traders made $675 million collectively, while over 800,000 investors lost a collective $2 billion. Just think about that ratio. It's a staggering ratio of 1 to 25,000 in terms of winners and losers when it comes to cryptocurrency. And the one person who did cash in, of course, was Donald Trump, who reportedly earned over $100 million just for the trading fees alone of his and Melania's meme coin. Then on March 2nd, last Sunday, was the third pump and dump operation. This time, Trump announced on Truth Social that a U.S. crypto strategic reserve was a go. The price of Bitcoin shot up to $95,000 a Bitcoin. But it didn't take long for investors to realize that the announcement was just a promotion for the summit, which is happening at the White House tomorrow, and not a green light for the cryptocurrency reserve as a whole. So the price went down. But that is a classic pump and dump operation. And while we're all spending a lot of time thinking about the alignment between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, it's worth noting that Putin has repositioned Russia in the crypto world. He recently legalized crypto mining, and he's also making international payments via cryptocurrency in order to avoid Western sanctions. Many people, including my guest tonight, argue that the focus shouldn't be on deregulating cryptocurrency, which he calls a government handout. Rather, he says, the focus should be on potential criminal activity in the White House, where market manipulation enriches a few, while others are left with empty Bitcoin wallets. So tonight we're joined by Peter Schiff, a renowned economist, financial commentator, and CEO of Euro Pacific Capital. Peter has been a vocal critic of cryptocurrencies for years and recently called the proposed U.S. crypto strategic reserve the biggest crypto rug pull of all time, while demanding a congressional investigation. As we stand on the eve of tomorrow's White House Crypto Summit, his warnings about market manipulation seem increasingly prescient. Peter Schiff, welcome to Narativ.
Thanks, Zeph, for having me on your podcast.
I'm really intrigued by this notion of a rug pull. I've never really heard of it before. Do you want to explain to people what a rug pull is? Because my audience may not be as in tune with your crypto lingo, as it were.
And what the concept is, somebody, promotes a new meme coin that they've created out of nothing and basically pumps it up to their community of followers. A bunch of people rush in to buy that newly minted meme coin, and then the creator dumps his coins on the market, and he basically pulls the rug out from under the followers who bought it, and the market collapses. He cashes out, and they get left holding the bag.
So it's like a classic pump and dump for a stock price,
yes.
Basically.
Donald Trump already did that with the Trump and Melania coins, right? They pulled the rug out from under all the people that bought those things, right? The price ran up to $70 within the first couple of hours from pennies. The last I looked at it was down around 12, 13 bucks. Yeah. They're worthless, but the people who promoted it cash in. They sell and they make a bunch of money off the suckers who get left holding the bag.
Let's talk a little bit about the Melania and Trump rug pull, because it certainly looks to me like there were 31 wallets that maybe gained $680 million out of that whole rug pull that involved the Trump meme coin and the Melania coin. On the other hand, there were $2.3 billion in losses associated with 810,000 wallets. And that's the ratio of these rug pulls. There's a few and a very few, in this case, only 31, which made a lot of money, and the rest are left holding the bag. That seems to be a pattern in the crypto world, in the Bitcoin world. Is it something that people should be really skeptical about getting involved in because of this kind of activity?
Yeah, absolutely. There's an old gambler saying, if you're playing poker and you don't know who the sucker is, it's you. So you have to get in on these things right away, very early, and then you have to get out very early. That's the only way you can make money. You get in and out. There's a young kid in my neighborhood, a 21-year-old kid, who made $10 million on Melania coin and a Trump coin. And he just paid $2.1 million for a house, a 21-year-old kid. Yeah, so he's one of the few that was just watching it very closely and just bought and sold instantaneously. He probably didn't even hold for an hour and just was able to extract that money. But look, if they were doing this with securities, they'd be in jail, right? But because these things are not securities, they just say they're collectibles. The pump and dump and insider trading or stock manipulation, none of that applies. You do whatever you want. And the president of the United States is doing it. And again, he did it again last weekend with his Sunday Truth Social post.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that, because that was really a remarkable thing. He put out this particular post. It says a U.S. crypto reserve will elevate this critical industry after years of corrupt attacks by the Biden administration, which is why my executive order on digital assets directed the President Working Group to move forward on a crypto strategic reserve that includes these coins, XRP, SOL, and ADA. I don't know what those are. I will make sure that the U.S. crypto is the capital of the world, and we are making America great again, which, of course, this did a lot for the market. Immediately, we saw a huge increase in the price of Bitcoin. It looked a little like this.
Yeah.
But then tell me what happened afterwards.
Yeah, first of all, Donald Trump did not write that. I would bet almost anything that he had nothing to do with writing that post. Because first of all, his working group did not say to go forward with his reserve. That's a lie. It said to study the potential. So it's a misrepresentation of what the working group was asked to do. But also, I don't think there's any way that Donald Trump knows that ADA is the symbol for Cardano. There's just no way. I didn't even know that. I had to look it up, right? There's no way. And just the way it's written, somebody else wrote that and tried to make it sound as if Trump had written it. So I don't even know if the president knew that it was posted on his account. Now, the question is, who wrote it? And who did he tell about it? And when did he tell about it? Because my guess is that the people who knew this was coming knew maybe as early as Friday, because that's when Bitcoin kind of started to rally back from its big drop. I bet there were some insiders who were close to Trump, donors, people in his inner circle who planned that. They bought those three coins in particular, because you'll notice the only coins that were mentioned didn't even mention Bitcoin, didn't even mention Ethereum, just mentioned Ripple, Cardano, and Solana, right? I bet they bought those three coins and waited, and then they put that post out Sunday afternoon, 1 o'clock. Everybody is asleep in Asia. No stock markets are trading. Thinnest markets possible. Maximum impact on price. They timed that. They shot the price up, and then they started selling. And I bet they made hundreds of millions. Those three coins were up 30, 40, 50% initially. Of course, it was a rug pull. They all went down lower than they were before the post hit, after they finished dumping. But I want to know, and I think the American people should demand to know, who is using the president's Truth Social account to manipulate the market for those tokens, traded on inside information, and made a fortune. Now, maybe it's not illegal because they're not securities, but it's wrong. And the public has a right to know, for transparency, who got rich off of this. And the president of the United States should disavow this kind of use of his accounts and people cashing in on his presidency. This is not the time when you're trying to root out government corruption to act this corrupt, when you're accusing people of using their position in Doge to enrich their families, and you're using the presidency to enrich your own or your other friends or donors. This is massive hypocrisy. And I'm embarrassed as an American that this is taking place.
Now, as you point out, this is not the first time in just a few months. We had the example we just spoke about, the meme coin example. But in fact, when he appointed David Sachs to the position of crypto czar, and he also appointed Atkins to the head of the SEC, there was also a massive rally in those announcements. And there's the same time that he announced his own investments in the in some of his own crypto ventures. So we had a real instance there where he was making announcements based on his presidential powers and appointing these officials who are going to be in charge of crypto. And he announced at the same time his own businesses, which are going to benefit from an increased crypto price.
There's a crypto summit in the White House happening tomorrow. And so they're pumping that up. But look, the last thing we need is for the U.S. government to get involved in the crypto industry. The U.S. government shouldn't get involved in any industry, let alone crypto. We want the free market to allocate capital. We don't want the government to pick winners and losers, to decide that the crypto industry is one that we need to support and then put public money into promoting the industry. We're supposed to be a capitalist economy, not a socialist economy. It's not central government planning. We want the market. So if people want to buy Bitcoin or any of these tokens, they could buy it. But the government shouldn't force taxpayers to buy it. Look, I don't want to buy any of these tokens. I got my own money. If I wanted to buy them, I'd buy them. I don't want my tax dollars used to buy these tokens. And the only people who benefit are the people who already own the tokens and who sell them to the government.
Tell me a little bit what happened. In the case of a crypto reserve, like, to explain to people who aren't familiar what a crypto reserve might do. What happens in that case? Do they take money out of the treasury and basically replace it with cryptocurrency as a reserve, or how does it work?
It's not really a reserve, because a reserve would imply that we might need those Bitcoin for something in the future. We don't need Bitcoin for anything now. So why are we going to need it? We have a reserve of oil because we may run out of oil. Maybe there'll be an embargo and we're out of it, right? You could have a reserve. Maybe you have a reserve of wheat in case there's a bad harvest and you don't want to starve to death. We're not going to run out of any of these cryptocurrencies. There's no need to hold them in reserve, because there's no point where the government's going to need them.
They have no benefit at all, really. When you think about it, these things are useless.
Yeah, the bill that Senator Loomis introduced, because she's been bought and paid for by crypto money, she says that she wants the government to buy 1 million Bitcoin and then not be able to sell any of them for 20 years. What good is a reserve that you can't tap into for 20 years, right? It's good. It's worthless. Even if there was something you could do with it, you can't even touch it for 20 years. All they want to do is reduce the supply of Bitcoin so that the price of Bitcoin will go up, so that people can sell it. And of course, the government is not price sensitive. If the government is required to buy Bitcoin, they have to pay whatever idiot price is there. So it's like, that's what the crypto people want. They're looking for a government bailout of their tokens, is what they want.
What you have is a pump and dump situation. Aren't you going to have a situation where they're going to spend the 20, whatever it is, to buy the 20, how much do you say, 20 million in crypto?
Well, buy 1 million.
1 million Bitcoin. They're going to buy 1 million Bitcoin, and then these prices are going to go way up, and then the market's going to crash, and we'll be holding it for 20 years.
Michael Saylor wants them to buy like 25% of the Bitcoin, of course, because he's leveraged to the hilt on the Bitcoin he's already bought. He's got 500,000 Bitcoin already that he borrowed $30-something billion to acquire. This whole thing is a Ponzi, a pyramid. It's a blockchain letter. It would be illegal if you actually did it in the real world, right? If I wrote a letter to you and I said, hey, send me $10 and then send this letter to somebody else and ask them to send you $10, we could go to jail. That's illegal. But you put it on the blockchain and you can get away with whatever you want.
It's just still a crime to do what they're doing. They're conspiring, obviously, to steal money from average Americans.
Yeah, and they want the government to steal it for them. I mean, it's the ultimate rent-seeking behavior. Look, it's one thing if you want to gamble with your own money, but don't gamble with taxpayer money. Now, some of these guys like Loomis says, oh, it's not going to cost the taxpayers anything, because the Fed is just going to print up the money and we'll use that new money to, so we're going to create more inflation to buy Bitcoin. Right? How is that going to benefit the public if we have to print money and then blow it on Bitcoin?
Now, talk to me a little bit about
look, this is all a payback for the campaign donations and the votes. It really is the worst element of democracy, right? This is the worst type of faction that has captured control of some politicians and is using their clout for their own gain at the expense of the broader country.
That's exactly the right segue for right now, because I do want to talk to you about Elon Musk and about he's pretty leveraged because he's got all these Bitcoins in his Tesla. He's got Tesla leveraged against X or Twitter. He's got SpaceX with tons of Bitcoin as well. All these, he's got a Bitcoin empire. If this scheme doesn't work and crypto collapses, his entire industry collapses, the entire ecosystem collapses.
I don't think Tesla and SpaceX own that much Bitcoin.
They do actually. They own quite a fair amount.
I thought they bought it. They bought some at one time, and then they sold most of it. I'm not sure how much they got left.
Okay, maybe. Sorry, I
remember they bought it, and for a while they said they were going to accept Bitcoin in payment for their Teslas, and then they canceled it because they said it wasn't working.
I'll double check that, but that's interesting. I thought that Tesla did actually have still quite a bit.
No, they have some left. But
regardless, you've got Andreessen Horowitz, you've got David Sachs, you've got this entire ecosystem of venture capitalists from the Silicon Valley world who are very heavily involved in this idea of cryptocurrency in various businesses and various sectors, and they are all in the White House right now.
Yes, that's their last hope to save this dying industry, which isn't even an industry. It's a big scam masquerading as an industry. When Donald Trump says that he wants to make America the crypto capital, that's the last thing we'd want to be the capital of. It's a capital of a pyramid scheme. Why would we want to be the capital of that? The country that wins the crypto battle is the country that wastes the least amount of money on it. China outlawed it. They're going to be the winners. The more money that goes into crypto, the weaker the U.S. economy becomes because we divert money away from the industries that we really need. We just came out today again with the worst monthly trade deficit in our history. We need to build factories, not meme coins, right? Our resources need to go to making the things that we actually need, creating worthless tokens and gambling with them.
I should tell you that Tesla does actually have it had 1.5 billion. It's now increased by an additional $1.2 billion. So they've got 11,509 Bitcoins on their balance sheet, and it's almost doubled.
Did it go up because the price of Bitcoin went up or because they bought more?
Increased value. I think it's the value has gone up. So I think it's because
the price went up.
Yeah, and they drove it up.
I don't think they bought more.
No, I don't think they bought more. I think it started at 1.5 billion, and then it's increased significantly because they've just seen the price go up.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean he bought more. And I think that when they bought those Bitcoin, it was a lot lower. I think maybe it was like 10,000 when Musk bought them. So
that's a significant amount of money sitting on your balance sheet.
I think they already sold enough Bitcoin to cover what they paid for them. So I think they're just gambling with the house's money. I don't think it's a meaningful amount on the balance sheet of Tesla. But
and you're right.
Remember, he got into Dogecoin. That was his favorite, Doge, right? That's why they call it Doge. That's where the Department of Government Efficiency is based on that meme coin that he fell in love with.
Unbelievable. Now, tell me a little bit about these countries. We're talking about China not playing in the Bitcoin market, but Russia and Vladimir Putin have recently said that they're very interested in this market. They've opened up their markets to mining and other parts of cryptocurrency. This is a change for them, but it's also, as we look at these conversations and these allegations and these obvious policy alignments with Putin that Trump has, do you think that there's a bigger concern there that you've got Putin on the one hand being quite in favor of jumping into this market and being a provider of Bitcoin because he wants to mine the stuff, and then Donald Trump creating the capital of the world, or the Bitcoin capital of the world, whatever he wants to call it?
Putin is too smart to want to buy Bitcoin or to encourage Russians to buy Bitcoin. They're buying gold. Sure, they have cheap energy in Russia. They probably are happy to mine Bitcoin and then sell them to idiot Americans who want to buy them. The best way to undermine the U.S. economy is to get us to buy a bunch of Bitcoin. And if they can make money selling us the Bitcoin, that's probably a great plan for Putin.
Yeah, it is a good plan for him indeed. So do you own any Bitcoin? You probably don't. I assume you don't.
No.
Would you advise anyone under these circumstances to get into this market? Because I've had a lot of people ask me this question recently, and I'm like, I have no idea what the answer is. But even if there's upside, it's not going to be that much.
The only way that you should get into this market is if you are a nimble trader and you want to trade the volatility. They're very volatile. And the way to trade it is to buy the dumps and sell the pumps, right? So whenever there's good news that makes Bitcoin go up, you got to sell, right? And then when there's a big drop, you can buy. And if you could do that often enough, you could end up making money. But you got to be nimble and you got to not be too greedy. You got to get out, and you can never buy into the hype, right? You always have to sell into the hype. And then But this is just trading. This is gambling. So it's gambling on anything else. But as a buy and hold, just buy it and hold it, I would never do it telling anyone to do that. Now, of course, if you bought and hold it 10 years ago, yeah, you're made a fortune on paper. Sold, you still don't have anything.
But at these elevated prices, not a good idea.
Yeah, I believe that the people who are holding it are going to be the bag holders, that eventually the market's going to implode. And the only people who would have actually made money are the people who got out. And there are plenty of people who got out and have already made millions of dollars on crypto and Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But the vast majority of people are going to lose in crypto. Just like you showed that chart for the meme coin, you have a small number of people who profit and a huge number of people that lose money and make those profits possible. All the money that people make in crypto will come from all the money that other people lose in crypto. There's no real value that is created. And also, Wall Street is now taking a big vig, right? People are paying a lot of fees and commissions to Wall Street. And so that is all sucked out of the pot. So it's a negative sum game for the participants, because it's not just one person loses and one person wins. You got the house taking a pretty big vig now out of the whole industry.
Yeah, I saw that those meme coins, Donald Trump and family made about $100 million just on the fees for that. Their portion of the fees. It's pretty good for a guy who's becoming president of the United States. Normally wouldn't dream of seeing $100 million on the way in. So you think there should be an investigation, right? You think that there should be some sort of congressional investigation into what the president's account was being used for, whether he was involved, whether he knew, and who made money off this particular rug pull that you said happened a week or so ago?
Look, I think so, but I don't think the Republicans who control the Congress or the House are going to look into it.
Yeah.
Maybe after they lose control, potentially in the midterms, maybe the Democrats might go back and look at it. But I think it should be looked at.
And thanks very much, Peter. I appreciate you being here today and explaining all this to me. I agree with you. I think that we need a world where we have much more transparency. It doesn't look like the current SEC is going to be holding anyone's feet to the fire for anything they do related to cryptocurrency. And yet there are endless cases, it seems, that they're just dropping week after week in terms of what they're investigating. And so there's no watchdog either. There's probably a lot more corruption going on than we realize right now with the cryptocurrency and other sectors. Peter Schiff,
especially now that it's with government. One of the old mottos from Bitcoin was we want to separate money and state. Now they want to marry Bitcoin to the state.
Yeah.
And it used to be about freedom from government. Now it's government taking over. Without government, if it wasn't for the prospect of a Bitcoin reserve and a crypto reserve, I believe that right now, like Bitcoin is at like 88,000 or something like that. I think it would be well under 50,000, maybe even under 20 by now, had Kamala Harris won, right? This is all politics, all based, not because, the industry is going to be deregulated and that's going to be good. It's going to be because they want the government to buy. But what they want the deregulation for is to make it easier to do these scams, right? To make sure that we could do these pump and dumps without the SEC coming in and trying to apply security laws to what we're doing. And I don't think it's security laws. I just think it's basic fraud, right? I don't think you have to call it a security to say these schemes are wrong.
Yeah.
They're just wrong because you are defrauding people. You are deliberately misleading people in your marketing and your promotion. And that's the crime. They don't have to be securities.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say about the reserve. Mark Andreessen was one of the first people who pulled support from Joe Biden and poured it behind Trump. And yet he's the guy who's got the most to win out of the crypto reserve. And he's the guy who's enabled David Sachs to be there as the cryptos are. So they've all got this like very close group of friends who are going to make a fortune off this. If a crypto reserve becomes reality, it's great for Elon Musk and company, but not for anybody else.
Donald Trump was very smart to align himself with crypto to win the White House. If he had any integrity, he would completely sever those ties now that he's got it, right? But he saw an opportunity to get a lot of campaign donations, right? The most money that was donated to his campaign came from crypto. And now they're looking for a return on that investment. He's under no obligation to do it. He could say, all right, I'm in, screw you.
We've got some meme coins waiting for him that, hey, he makes some money on the back end if he does, because those prices will also go up.
And a lot of people voted for him that owned Bitcoin because they were single issue voters. A lot of Democrats who owned Bitcoin voted Trump, not because they are Republicans, but because they expected Trump to make their Bitcoin go up. So they were voting based on their own personal skin in the game. They didn't really care about anything else. They were a single issue voter, right? They could have disagreed with Trump on everything else. But as long as he's going to support this Bitcoin reserve, I'm voting for him because that's going to mean my Bitcoin is going to go up. And I don't think Trump lost a lot of votes from people that don't own Bitcoin. That was the beauty of it.
Yeah.
By coming out so pro Bitcoin, he got all sorts of votes from the Bitcoin people, but he didn't lose any votes from the non-Bitcoin people because they didn't even care.
Yeah.
It was like a non-issue to them. So it was a perfect political maneuver because normally if you take a stance like, oh, I'm pro-choice, great. I got the pro-choice vote. I just lost all the pro-life vote.
Yeah.
Right? So you take a stand, it's not all one-sided, but you come out pro-crypto, there is no big anti-crypto organized community. They don't care.
Well, they really should be. They really should be.
Well, they should.
Yeah.
But they don't know how much they lose.
Yeah.
Just look, why do we have the Jones Act, which runs up the cost of shipping and transportation all over the United States, particularly in places like Hawaii, Puerto Rico, right? But everything could be shipped cheaper. And therefore, everything can cost less. Right now, Donald Trump is like, hey, what can we do to bring down costs? Let's get rid of the Jones Act. That'll bring down shipping costs sharply. Why do we have the Jones Act? Because the people who benefit from the Jones Act make hundreds of millions of dollars a year, and they give a big chunk of that to a few key senators and congressmen, and that's why we never lose it. Because the people, every person, every man, woman, and child, maybe everybody is $100 worse off or $200 worse off because of the Jones Act. Nobody knows, right? The losses are too broadly dispersed among an unorganized population. But the gains are narrowly focused on a very small group of people. And they are highly motivated to make sure that that Jones Act stays there.
And that's exactly the same as crypto.
It's horrible.
And you've got a crypto lobby that's very busy in DC right now. They own a lot of people. And so that's probably accounting for why it'd be a really interesting exercise to see how many Democrats and Republicans own Bitcoin at the moment or are exposed to that lobby. That'll be really interesting. Peter, thank you very much for being on the show today. I really appreciate your time. Is there something you want to talk about or promote, or is there anything that you want to share with our audience so they know where they can find you and where they can follow what you do?
Sure. While people are distracted by fool's gold, the real thing is almost $3,000 an ounce. But I think the best buy right now isn't above ground gold, but below ground gold. I think the gold mining stocks are as cheap as they've ever been. I think the prospect of huge upside is real and imminent in that sector. I think people should be really, if you have the risk tolerance, to really load up the boat on these mining stocks. We have separately managed accounts of mining stocks. That's one of the strategies we have at Europe Pacific Asset Management. You can contact us. We also manage a fund, a mutual fund. You can buy it no load at any discount brokerage firm. The ticker symbol is EPGIX, Europe Pacific Gold Fund. People should buy that. Yes, put money in that you can afford to lose. But I think the upside potential is so enormous. I really think that people can make, 10x or more, 20x, or in this fund over the next several years, maybe before Trump leaves office. Of course, I could be wrong and it can go down, but you can't lose anywhere near that much. The companies aren't all going to go bankrupt, so it's not going to zero. So I think from a risk-reward asymmetric perspective, this is where the crypto gambling money should go. If you really want to go to the moon, I think it's the gold stocks that might get you there. So people should look into it at get a prospectus. You can read it. All that is on my website at europac.com. Follow me on social media. I do my podcast, The Peter Schiff Show. I do it live now on YouTube as on my YouTube channel. You can also listen to it at Schiff Radio. Follow me on X. I'm posting all the time there, trying to shine a light on these scams. Got over 1.1 million followers now. So, follow me and tell your friends. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and all the social media. Oh, and I've got a new publishing venture, Schiff Sovereign. Go to schiffsovereign.com. We got a free newsletter. We get 2 or 3 emails a week, valuable information. We've also got some premium products that you could sample and sign up for. A lot of very good information that we're putting out. You can learn about the type of information just by going to schiffsovereign.com and checking out the website.
Peter Schiff, CEO of Europe Pacific Asset Management. Thank you for being on the show tonight.
All right. My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Narativ. Few people can explain Canadians to Americans and vice versa better than our guest tonight. Kevin Newman has pulled off that rare feat of being a network news star on both sides of the border. Now, not many people can say that.
Today's hottest cartoon is called South Park, and it's a show that comes on long past most kids' bedtimes.
Americans will remember him as the co-host of Good Morning America back in the late 90s. Newman was so new to American audiences, it seemed like he came out of nowhere. But for those of us who've known Kevin for years now, he is first and foremost a highly skilled journalist. He's one of the very best. He cut his teeth at Global Ontario back in '81, worked his way through the Canadian media landscape with stops at CTV and CBC, before making it to the big leagues in the United States. When he returned to Canada, he founded Global National and anchored it for nearly a decade before moving to various roles at CTV. These days, he runs his own shop, Kevin Newman Ideas, where he's producing docs and investigative content that's making big waves. And lately, he's been sounding the alarm about what he calls Canada's greatest vulnerability, disinformation. And he's not just talking about it. He's building a rapid response fact-checking unit to combat the tsunami of bogus information flooding into Canada. And he's also launched a brand new project, which is all about disinformation. And it's called, as his sweatshirt blazingly says, Get Fact, which is a play on words, right, Kevin?
Sure is.
We're going to get to your project and hear all about your efforts to combat disinformation later in the show. I just want to say thank you for coming onto Narativ. We have known each other for quite some time. And I'd hazard a guess that it's maybe a 10, 15, 20 years? I don't know.
We were like crossing in the night a few times, but yeah, no, I'm a huge admirer of your talent and I've watched your show lots.
Oh, thank you so much. And likewise, it's a real honor to actually have you on Narativ because you are so talented and you are such a great journalist. And more than anything else, I think people underestimate how difficult it is to jump between a Canadian culture and an American culture. And you've done it a couple of times back and forth. It's difficult. Why do Canadians have such a hard time adjusting to America?
We have a very big window onto American culture and Americans, but it's mostly through television. And it's mostly through how we consume media in Canada. That's what I discovered, that a lot of my preconceptions about how easily we would blend together turned out to be not true. And anyone knows that when you travel, the place that you're visiting, the difference of that place to what you're accustomed to is laser focused. And so I found when I first moved down, I was hyper aware of the things that I didn't expect. The society was more traditional than I expected it to be, that in some areas it had been frozen in time, and in other areas it was way ahead of everything that we were doing in Canada. I was going down to report on Americans for Americans. I wasn't, as some reporters do, going down to America to report back to Canadians. It took me a few years to figure out the audience, frankly, and to understand what was news in America, because we had such different and rich histories.
I'll add one other difference that I found there, and maybe you didn't find it that intensely competitive, but it was really a competitive workspace in a way that I'd never encountered a journalistic environment. And what we're going through right now reminds me of how aggressive Americans are. Donald Trump does feel uniquely American, even though it's inspired probably from the Kremlin. It still feels American in some ways. It's so aggressive.
It's aggressive and it's storytelling. And they would get to the point in the American Revolution where they would tell them that the losers had to leave the country and that they could go nowhere else but to head to the Great White North and freeze their buns off. And in the narrative of today, where people are asking, well, why wouldn't you want to become of America? Because as they've grown up, learning that we were kind of the losers of the North, that we really wanted to be Americans, but we were kicked out because we weren't loyal enough.
Right.
And so when you look at the context of what's being said now from Trump and from others, it's we're offering you something that's incredible. We're offering you us.
Yes.
And that just comes from the continual belief of American exceptionalism. And you're right, incredibly competitive. But at the top of their field, the excellence is extraordinary. I soaked all of that up and quite often looked around the room and I thought, oh, God, please don't open your mouth because you are clearly the dumbest person here.
Well, I doubt that. It really is an impressive feat what you did there. So many talented people all competing for the same roles. And to be able to rise to the very top as you did is remarkable. And then to stay there and then also come and make another incredible career here in Canada, really impressive. Let's talk about the breaking news today because there is so much of it. And we'll get back to your career a little later on and some other stuff. So the White House just releasing this new readout on their talks between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin today. He claims that there's some sort of agreement here, but there really isn't. When you get into the thick of it, they agree on energy, but they don't really agree on anything else. They say they'll start talks in the Middle East soon or immediately, but much more than that is not given in the statement. And it's a really telling thing about the White House, because it's another myth that the White House is putting out there as this is what we've achieved. He's on his way to a Nobel Peace Prize, if you believe Donald Trump, and nothing will stand in his way, including reality. What's your sense of this relationship between Trump and Putin?
Yeah, okay. That is the question everyone's asking. Because as a Canadian, to imagine that he's being tougher on us than he is on Vladimir Putin is stunning. And I think that's part of the sort of the shake your head moment that's happening up here. But you even look at that statement, and what it says is that, okay, we're agreeing that there might be the possibility of a ceasefire on energy and infrastructure. And oh, by the way, we're going to be taught, we also agreed that we're going to allow normalized relations around certain aspects of our relationship. You want to bet that's energy and infrastructure jobs and pouring some of the opportunity into Russia again. The transaction, it feels very transactional. It doesn't feel like it's actually about peace. It feels about opportunity for American businesses. Both of them think, I don't know. It's stunning to me that nobody can figure out what it is. That there's just a ton of speculation about, is it that he admires the way he works? Is it that he's the mob boss who, and this is what I'm leaning towards, is that he's looking at the world through a very New York mob kind of way, which is that there are families here, there are families there. Canada's going to be one of my family, whether they want it or not, but we're going to bring them in. What that means for Ukraine is obviously proving to be difficult. What that means for Taiwan is proving to be difficult, but that is how he sees the world. When he thinks America first and pulling back into America, I think he sees it as spheres of influence on the same planet, assuming that that's enough for the other guy.
Yeah.
But I don't know that that's the case.
I think that whether you believe he's an asset or not or anything like that, I think it's hard to avoid that he is under enormous Russian influence, whether that's through the mob, through his business activities, through his
conversations would seem to be, we still don't. And I do remember that the very first thing that the first Trump White House wanted to create was a private line between Putin and Trump. And then that got leaked and that never happened. But it's clear that from the very beginning, he's wanted to have a special relationship with Vladimir Putin.
And even if you pull back any of that speculation and you just say, look at their policy positions, look at the policy positions that he's pushing, everything seems to be so aligned with Russia, and the Kremlin admits it.
Yeah.
So unusual. You're still talking about an American president who is supposedly the leader of the free world and aligning with one of the least free countries in the world and the least free leaders in the world, but it's also frightening in some ways.
Well, and as a Canadian, there's been plenty of stories, I don't know if you've seen them, where they lay the rhetoric that Putin used against Ukraine after the Crimea grab. And you look at the approach of the Trump administration to the discussion of Canada, or at least Trump's, and there's very similar. There's obviously disinformation and misinformation underway. There's a questioning of whether or not Canada is a real country. It's nothing without us, Trump says. There's questionings about whether the border is even legitimate. Those are exactly the same things that Putin laid out year after year after year to try to undermine Ukrainian sovereignty. Didn't end up working. It ended up stiffening their spine. If that's about to be attempted in a long-range way against Canada, we'll find out which way that goes. The intent is that it kind of saps our will to fight over time, but time has shown in the Ukrainian example that the longer you go on, it actually increases resistance to you over time. So
it also fosters a hatred. At the end of the day, the Ukrainians absolutely hate the Russians. And I think it probably goes the other way too. And that would be a really crazy thing to imagine, that Canadians would hate Americans and Americans would hate Canadians. But when you look at the tariffs that are being instituted, you look at the narrative that is being sown every day, Trump is telling America that Canada has done something bad to them. Surely his faithful are believing some of that. Justin Trudeau is supposedly the starter of the trade war. 20% of Americans believe that. Right? And when you think about that conflict in Ukraine, as you were just pointing out, and how that narrative is what led to that conflict, are we leading to the same place where we're actually talking about a real conflict that could lead to war, could lead to global war?
I didn't think so until a week ago. I thought that was too extreme. I thought that when push came to shove, that, let's be honest, both you and I have lived in America. We have many American friends. Am I willing to die to not be American? No. You're local. That's the question, right?
I would say that, Kevin. You meant to say I'll fight till the very end.
Oh, I know, but I love Americans. And some of them, a lot of Americans are my very good friends. So it's not that kind of thing. Will I feel different about them next time I see them? Probably not, because we've been friends for a very long time.
Yeah.
But some of those feelings will rise over time. They're already rising. I don't know if you saw it today, but border crossings were down 500,000 people between Canada and the United States. It was our March break up here last week. If you went to the area of the Toronto airport that was typically jammed as everyone went south, it was a ghost town. And so Canadians are acting in peaceful ways to register their protest. I haven't seen this yet, but there's some talk about turning American products on shelves upside down so that people recognize there's America. People are very pissed off. Nothing's happened to us yet.
Yes.
Right? Unless you're a steel worker in Hamilton, in which case stuff's starting to happen. And I will be interested to see what happens to notions of resilience in Canada once grocery prices go up 20%, once you can't get that part to fix something because the supply chains are all screwed up because no one knows what to charge. We're heading into something substantial, and it really will be a test of our nationhood and our attachment to it. And the truth, I think, is that not as many Canadians as you and I might expect are all that attached to it, especially the younger Canadians. There's in poll after poll that shows that people my age, 65 and older, we're ready to fight because like our money's in the bank.
Right.
But 18 to 34, 28% of Canadians say that this is something worth fighting for because they feel rightly that they're probably not going to get a house, that their career isn't looking good, their future is not looking good. And so the opportunity to be part of the most energetic, competitive, crazy place on earth doesn't necessarily sound like a bad deal.
So is there actual polling showing that the younger Canadians are actually more in favor of this idea of annexation?
Several polls, and it's not by a small margin. It goes from 67% my age. If I had a kid that was under 34, it'd be 28%. So
largely due to the disinformation efforts or the vast amount of social media that's consumed by younger audiences, and there's so much disinformation there, or do you think that that's just a genuine, outlook on life? They might feel they might do better in an American setting.
I think that's it. I think that's where they are in life. They've got lots of runway room and the opportunity to live and work in South Carolina. If there's labor mobility, isn't necessarily a terrible idea, especially by the time you reach March in Ontario. Yeah. So I think that's part of it. But I also think that we've spent a decade looking at our history and focusing on the areas where it failed modern standards. And so much of my generation's attachment is stories that weren't necessarily true, that made us feel good about ourselves. And stories that, we repeat the same thing over and over again. Tim Hortons, blah, 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 blah. Whereas I think younger Canadians took a much more critical eye at our history and looked at it and said, well, I know you guys feel pride, but there's not necessarily things to feel that proud about. And in fact, if you peel it back, there are things to be shameful for. So the attachment to the country among younger Canadians may be of a very different form.
But economically, it makes more sense to stay as Canada. Amount of per capita debt that you'd be carrying as an individual, it's certainly much higher if you're part of the United States than if you are a Canadian. You get free healthcare here. Well, that's pretty nice. You don't get that there. There's just a lot of factors that make Canada pretty appealing. It's a small country, but boy, there's a lot of opportunity, and you have all these resources that are coming to play, plus a future which is going to be influenced by what happens up in the Arctic. You're talking about a boon in resources and a boon in trade routes and trading that goes right down the Canadian border. This is incredible to have that exposure to the Arctic. That is what, in fact, America wants so badly, is the Arctic. And they get a better deal by annexing us, I think, than vice versa.
My view is that we would have a problem keeping people here because our dollar suddenly would be worth probably half of what it is today. There's no way that would be the negotiation.
Yeah, you don't think so? That's what that was floated out there in the initial stages of this thing. I'd love to see the reaction to that kind of scenario in Canada. I think a lot of people would love it.
All of which is to say, we shouldn't be too smug about our own resilience in this moment. Yes, there's a surge of patriotism going on, but the pain hasn't started yet. So let's see. I have reason to believe, for instance, during the Afghan war, when I was anchoring Global National, when I had to anchor about continual deaths of Canadian servicemen and women in Afghanistan, support for the war went up. So we do have a little bit of that Scottish and Irish in us, like you pick a fight and we're there for you. I guess we'll see. But I think we have to be very clear that at this moment in time, there's a lot of worry, but we're not yet seeing the impact of it.
And a lot of it really depends on what happens in the upcoming elections, which currently looks really interesting. You've got Mark Carney, who's the new prime minister. He is going to be likely the winner of this election, should he call it as soon as this week. He might not, but he might call it as early as Friday. And it looks like, according to the latest polls, 34% probability that he will win a majority government. That is quite unbelievable, considering just a few weeks ago, it looked like the Conservatives under Poilievre were going to sweep this election. It's not looking like that anymore.
I think Canadians understand that we're looking for a wartime prime minister, that this is a time for calm heads and unity. And I think that's what Carney is starting to represent. It is the opposite of what we've come to know from Pierre Poilievre up to this point, that he is very partisan, very negative, and is fighting the war that he knows how to fight. And that's a very political war in that trench. And so I think one of the things, and I've covered elections and I've anchored elections, and at the end of every election night, I always have this feeling in Canada. I haven't always had that feeling in the United States. I've always had the feeling in Canada that there is a wisdom, a collective wisdom in Canada, that when it looks at something, the right answer comes out the other end. For the last year, the answer has been, we're done with Trudeau, and we are looking at this other guy because we're done with Trudeau. And there was wisdom in that. And I think there is wisdom in this moment right now where Canadians are saying, okay, we understand what the stakes are now. So you guys got to prove which one of you is going to keep us safe.
Right.
And which one of you is going to keep the life as safe as you can. Yeah. And that's a big, important election ballot question. The safety and the future, financial future of every Canadian has ever been a ballot question like this one will be. This will be a very serious-minded election. And if the candidate who matches that mood, which I feel in the country, will likely do better.
Let's be clear what we're talking about. In line with what you were saying earlier, we could be seeing a Canadian-American war. It's something that's not unfeasible this time. And that is really the question that Carney's going around the world as he's building these alliances with out the United States and with these European leaders. This is the stakes that he's discussing with them, is what happens if there is a full frontal war between America and Canada.
I think we're alone. They would fracture their own relationship with the United States if it got that crazy and if it got that far. But let's be honest, we are a military of 42,000 versus a military of 1 million plus. It's over in a week if they really want to do it. But I look at the polls in the United States, 68% of Americans aren't sure why this is happening. Like it doesn't pass is this what? Canada?
It's like a South Park plot, right? It doesn't sound like an actual.
No. It actually was a South Park invasion of Canada. Yeah. But yeah, I think many Americans think it's all still part of the posturing of Trump and a negotiation. But I think the rest of the world believes that it's moved far beyond that, and certainly Canadians do.
I think once they saw his resolve to support Putin in Ukraine with that intelligence effort, dropping that intelligence support, the Kursk offensive, you really have a sense there that he's willing to do anything and he's not really concerned about lives. And if he wants something, and he does want, as clearly as he's saying it every day, he believes he deserves for national security and international security. He says he needs Greenland and he needs Canada. He's put 48 icebreakers now. Those icebreakers are not designed just to protect Alaska. They're designed to patrol the shores of Canada and Greenland. Those are countries he hopes to literally own in the near future.
Well, and it was interesting, Mark Carney in Iqaluit today, the Prime Minister, announcing that our distant early warning enhancements along our border are going to be built by the Australians.
Yeah.
So that we don't have to share the data with America necessarily, or we have sovereignty over the data. This data sovereignty thing is becoming really, really interesting in military circles in Canada, because so much of the equipment that we have bought has been to completely and fully integrate our data with the U.S. military. And that's the F-35, that's some of the other, that has been a push inside the military for complete integration. And now, in the last 2 weeks, it's a 360 of where do we have data sovereignty? Are the Americans the only one who can cut us off from the data that we need to be able to fly these planes? Really big.
Backdoor kill switch, which apparently exists in some of this technology, which the Americans might have on some of these planes and other technology we're so used to buying from them. And that's concerning. Yeah.
The nature of the conversations that are going on, finally, inside government, I think I have enough sources inside saying that even inside the government, it typically takes them a while to realize that wishful thinking is dead. But inside the government of Canada now, wishful thinking is dead.
Now, there is also, you were saying you're going to be alone, but there is support, and the support is coming from the King of Canada, who's still our king. There he is, cut off a little bit, but you can see King Charles handing over a sword, a ceremonial sword to, I think it's just the head of the...
One of his principal secretaries is Canadian. Yeah.
Okay. So he's handing the sword. He's not allowed to actually say anything political about it. So he's doing this symbolically because it's his only way of doing it, to hand over the sword as a will protect you kind of gesture. And there is Catherine wearing red and white, which is another supposedly sign of support by the royal family. And ultimately, we are still part of that empire in Canada. Do you still think that won't come into play in the event of an American?
Well, the only deterrent that we really have against the Americans is someone else's nuclear umbrella, right? Frankly,
would be France.
Yeah, and theirs doesn't extend this way.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Didn't have to.
Now, do you think that that's fixable?
You don't want to think about it.
It's terrible to think about. Let's talk about disinformation then. In my mind, this is all about a disinformation war. I've been fighting it for 8 years. Twitter, as it was then, now X, became a battleground for disinformation and information. And I didn't know it at the time, but it certainly has been my 8-year experience that that's what we were doing. Fast responses to narratives that were being seeded on Twitter. And once seeded on Twitter, people don't understand the value and importance that platform had for so many years and still has today. Even though Elon Musk owns it and many people have left it, it remains the battleground. And Russia determined it was the battleground. They bought it and still own the battleground. And this is where the battle is taking place. It's a battle for ideas and story and facts. And it has real world consequences when they talk about the JFK papers and the JFK files, and it becomes something of a political issue. And today we're supposedly seeing these 80,000 pages being released. That all came from a Twitter disinformation campaign, came from the Kremlin directly. And now it's part of our discourse in America. It's becoming the story in America. It's very clear to me that this is a disinformation war, and how Canada reacts on that disinformation battleground is so significant. And this brings us to your project, which is so interesting and exciting. And tell people about Get Fact and what you're hoping to achieve.
Well, let me talk to you about the information war for a second, because that's the context behind what we're trying to do. We have none. For instance, Britain has a battalion that deals with information wars, and we don't have anything at all. Britain, Estonia, Norway, Sweden, they all have all of government approaches to this thing. We have no all of government approach. Our Canadian security establishment, it does monitor misinformation, but it reports once a year to Parliament. And so if there's a misinformation attack going on, we're not going to know about it from them. And so that's the context behind what we're trying to do. And we're basically like a citizens' resistance movement around disinformation or Canadian sovereignty. This is how they're going to try to weaken our will to resist and try to undermine our political stability. This information is the weapon that's going to be used against Canada, as well as economic coercion. And to not have any sort of defense from our military and our government, frankly, is a shame, because there's nothing more important that either of them are supposed to do but defend us from attack.
This is what happened in 2016 in the United States when we were fighting this battle on Twitter. It was basically soccer moms. They all chose their niches. They all figured out what they were going to dive into, and they all organized themselves in this very organic way. It was really interesting to watch how everyone sort of took their path, and then they reported to different people. And in many cases, they came to Narativ with a lot of information, and that's how able to piece the story. So it became like the largest crowdsourcing project I had ever seen. You know, this was a group of people organically deciding they were not going to believe the story that was out there and challenging it in this organic crowdsourced way. And what you're suggesting to do in Canada is very similar to that. And it's very powerful and very effective.
I hope it is, because there's the cultural difference though, right? Americans are accustomed to pulling up their bootstraps and dealing with it themselves when the government isn't there.
Yeah.
That's in Canada, culturally, we tend to wait for government to act. Well, we can't wait because the war is underway. So we have about 120. I just basically put a post on LinkedIn 2 months ago, and I said, okay, this looks serious. This is happening. Hey, all you creative Canadians and AI researchers, if you're sitting around stewing about stuff, let's do something. And so we did. We've organized ourselves. We're launching, hopefully on April 2nd, Get Fact. We got a name that's a little bit fun that we hope goes viral. It is basically an attempt to educate and provide a place for Canadians where they can get fact. So that comes in a couple of forms. One is we're going to compete on social media by putting out videos on Rumble and TikTok and Switch and all the places that the video disinformation comes at us, but again, there has been no defense. We're working on a bot. Currently, we're trying to train an LLM, take a tweet, let's say you have a tweet from Trump, cut and paste it, put it in the bot. It'll tell you what is verified, what is unverified, what is partially verified. So it'll separate looking at all the sources that AI can look at. So we're hoping that we're creating a tool so that people will begin to understand that it's not a black and white world. It's a world of gray. And that in fact, this bot's default will be to assume that the world is gray, not true or false. We're going to do a podcast, which I'm happy to have you on soon, about your experience in the United States, which would be great. And a newsletter that's going to basically say, these are the trending misinformation stories about Canadian sovereignty that are happening right now. And just try to show Canadians that these are monstrously successful ways of trying to poison our minds and poison our thought process and turn us against each other and make an enemy out of the United States or make a friend out of the United States. We have had the luxury of being a very uninteresting place until now. And our election campaigns, there wasn't much activity because we were uninteresting. But as you said, with the Arctic, with the play with the Americans now, we unfortunately do not live in uninteresting times.
It's interesting what you're talking about. It's so exciting because I think that you're also going to find a lot of people on the American side of the border that are just as interested in helping Canada.
I hope so.
What you'll need is a lot of people retweeting and a lot of people supporting your points of view and digesting it and then communicating that separately in their real worlds, but also online. And you're going to get that bulk, I think, from a surprising number of Americans who are very supportive of Canada.
Maybe that's the psychological operations side of it, is that you know yourself. I'm always amazed at how many people are aware of like CBC News online because they see it like BBC News and it's considered impartial and not as partisan. Yeah, that would be great. But we also, as I mentioned earlier, we have a job in buttressing our own resilience and teaching ourselves about mis and disinformation because we've been left to our own devices on it.
In my experience, the thing that is the best part about disinformation is if you get it early, you get a narrative that they're just starting to build early and you nip it in the bud, you can actually kill a narrative. And it could take one tweet by one person just
how did you find it? Like, how did you, because I'm really interested in this because we need to find exactly that. We need to find that moment when it's germinating on both left and right.
As early as you possibly can. This is my experience. We used to wake up at 8 o'clock every day. I still sit at my desk every day and look at social media because I want to check out exactly what the narratives are. There's stuff there for you to start feeding on. And you need a global view of where you are on these narrative fronts and what they might be putting out there. But if you can spot them, and they're not hard to spot once you get used to them, they have certain games that they play. It's like a sport almost for them. These patterns become predictable.
Do you have spotters that send you stuff?
A lot of people send me stories along the way. I mean, this crowdsourced community would say, hey, is this true or whatever? The best way to do it is to really build a comprehensive database of what you know are facts and timelines that are very useful because you just have to cross-reference timelines with stories that they put out. And you can say, well,
that's what you do a lot of. Like you pull the threads together.
Yeah.
Because and that's the storytelling part of it, right? Is that everybody's seeing everything come at them, but you're able to pull that together and say, here's the narrative. There's the
And that's exactly why I called it that. But the idea is that if you've got a factual timeline, anytime they throw facts out, because you can only be in one time, in one space at a given time. Like it's very hard for Putin to be in 3 different places. He might, because he's got all these doubles. But at the end of the day, you can see what they're saying are lies and what are truths because it's impossible for time and space to be corrupted so far. Maybe it is, but we don't know about it. If you've got that repository of facts and ideas, and I think the opportunity here for Canadians to show real resolve is actually going to be on social media. So I know people don't like to be on social media. I know Canadians are loath to be on X, especially, but people should get back on there and fight the good fight, even with Carney.
I see it every day too.
Unbelievable how much stuff they're putting out there. And the Epstein stuff, if Epstein was interested in being with him, it was because he was trying to blackmail him, not because he was part of that group. So I hope Canadians jump back in onto social media and really support us.
I do think that we need literacy around mis and disinformation. And the problem is you and I worked in journalism. This was part of our training, was how to drill down on stuff. But people are starting to, there's been so much of it, people are starting to say, I don't think any facts are true.
Right. And they start just believing
and there are true facts.
They want you to believe there is no truth. They want you to believe that this is a post-truth era and anything they can say is plausible. I've been working with Dean Blundell, who's another great Canadian working in the space, and some other people about launching a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week network, which we're doing under the Narativ banner, but it's really the voice of freedom beaming back into the United States. Truth, because now there is so much.
You're doing Voice of America from Canada because there is no Voice of America now.
There is no Voice of America now. And it also reminds me of a radio station I worked with in South Africa, where we broadcast from an independent homeland called Botswana.
Your life is like full circle.
This is a very full circle. Kevin, is there any message you would give Americans in particular about this Canadian challenge which is coming towards them?
Don't believe it's posturing. There's a long history. And if you've been in history of America, you know that this comes around on Canada every 50 years or so, 50, 75 years. Someone becomes president or somebody gets the idea in them that, ooh, that'd be a nice big fat country if it had the whole continent. So it is a streak of America that many Americans support. But for Canadians, I guess it is time. You have woken up finally. Now it's time to step up, right? Like, it's going to be hard. And if you're relying on government to solve this problem, then it won't get solved the way you want to solve it. I know a lot of people are losing sleep in the country, but we need to turn that anxiety into some kind of action, even if it's just talking to your kids about what's your credit card debt like? Yeah. Are you ready for what's about to come at us? Because it's going to be substantial and it's going to be a test of our resilience.
The stakes aren't really about us only. It's not just about Canada and Canada's sovereignty. We're talking about the future of democracy. We're talking about freedoms that we enjoy in Canada, and certainly many people enjoyed in the United States up until now, that are beginning to be cut back. And I think that ability to represent your own government is so fundamental to Canada, and it was so in the United States, that there really is a fear that with America becoming far more autocratic, that Canada is really the last country in the world that really can fight that battle for the world. And there are millions of people around the world who rely on there to be some sort of beacon. If that beacon is not the United States, then it is Canada. And the stakes are much bigger than just the Canadian sovereignty issue and the Arctic and all those other things. They're really about how the world is going to be ruled. Just because there's a big, monstrous, biggest military in the world coming at you does not mean that they're not defeated. That's the old story.
No, that has not been the recent military history.
Yeah. So we can do it. Of
resistance,
smart thinking, resistance. And we have the knowledge, especially if you look at what the Ukrainians did with drones in Ukraine. They've been able to build the biggest drone producing infrastructure in the world. They're admired around the world. They're going to be able to license that to Canada now for our defense. In a world where you're not using nuclear weapons, hopefully, drones become a very, very powerful.
They're a frontline weapon now.
And we've got one of the biggest AI communities in the world here. It might seem like we're fighting this David and Goliath battle, but at the end of the day, it was David who won that battle. So I speak to Americans all the time who want support from the outside world, who are desperate for the outside world to help them as well. And a majority, I'd say, of Americans are not in favor of what's going on, certainly not in favor of a war with Canada. And we do anything to avoid that. We have a lot of allies inside the United States. This isn't really about the people of America as much as it is about the regime that's now ruling America. And they might need to be liberated. They might need our help to liberate them.
Resistance movements have proven themselves effective because armies don't know how to fight them. And resistance movements, in this case, much as they have been in Ukraine and Russia, Ukrainians and Russians can speak the same language. They look similar. They can, if you imagine that we get to the point that there is conflict, it's not hard to imagine an undercover fifth column of Canadians anywhere in America, frankly, because we can blend in well. Mm-hmm. And with hybrid warfare, as you say, and the way of destabilizing other places in the way that Ukraine has been doing in Russia, anything's possible.
I remember there was a period of time, people used to call ABC a bunch of Canadians. And it was your time.
Anchored by Canadians, I think they did. Yeah. There were a lot of Canadians in New York at the time.
There were.
We were a fifth column, actually. The call would go out when there was a hockey game that everybody had to watch. And we'd meet at one of the many, many Irish bars in New York.
The Canadians have had an incredible influence on Americans through their journalism and through many other things, but certainly through the journalism. And you're a big part of that. There's a lot of love for Canadians in the United States.
I learned to love America. When I left ABC to come back to Canada to start up Global National, Peter Jennings gave me an American flag from the Capitol Dome.
Oh, wow.
And only he could have gotten that, by the way. And he put it in my hands and I looked at it and I got a chill up my spine. And so ever since then, I have two flags in my cabin. I have that flag, and I have one that flew on the West Block of Parliament Hill that I was given by Global National when I left. So for me, this is a very strange place to be too, because I know the words like you do to the national anthem. I can sing them, and I have sung them in many places because I felt that duality. So I don't, like you, I know that for most Americans, this is a head scratcher. But I also know the power of mis and disinformation, and that you don't need half the country to want something for it to happen. It can be as small as 10% if the rest of the country stays quiet. And so I hope Americans take this seriously and speak up on our behalf.
I love that imagery of those two flags. I think it represents exactly where we are in this time, and exactly where you are in this time, what you and your team do at Get Fact, and we'll definitely be supporting it. Is there a website that people should check you out? Is there
GetFact.ca. It'll be launching on Thursday.
Okay, we look forward to it, and thanks very much for being on Narativ tonight.
One day, you'll tell the story of autocrats, crooks, and kings who came for our freedom. A story of citizens who stood up to tyranny and won. The people prevailed and renewed an old vow to a more perfect union. And that was just the beginning. The story continues. Narativ, where truth lives.
Now we're live. Now we're live.
Now, and Zev Shalev on the 5 Stat, bringing you the top 5 stories of the moment, as it were. And there are lots of them today. It's a busy day in the world. Feels like you're in Calgary. I'm in Toronto. How's the weather?
Yeah, we're going to start with weather, are we? Insurrection. Triggered new mark parties in France, you securing new deals, and you're like, how's the weather? That's let you bury the lead, dude.
I'm just gently easing into it. I'm having like a laid back chat in the afternoon. I'm actually waiting for some people to show up because we have more people come in.
This is a strategy where we do a little small talk a little bit.
I love small talks.
Small chat, let people come in. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. Weather here is beautiful at 78 degrees. It's been shit the whole week that I've been here. I've been here on business, traveling around, talking to people, meeting people. A separate business that I do other than this business, obviously. And it's really been eye-opening, to be honest with you. And I actually put a tweet out about this ad at Steam Blundell today on that incredible app. And effectively, the conversations that I've had with several people in Alberta, which gets a really bad rap as a conservative captured Maple MAGA province. It is not. And whatever heat, whatever momentum MAGA, Maple MAGA, that authoritarian conservative movement, religious movement had, has disappeared. I mean, everybody that I talked to that was going to vote for Pierre Poilievre 2-3 months ago, before Donald Trump ascended to his fiefdom, as the King of America, that's disappeared. It's gone. It's been absolutely encouraging. It's been lovely to talk to people who have been hoodwinked by MAGA, the Maple MAGA, who see what Donald Trump is doing, who see that version of Donald Trump and Pierre Poilievre, who is just cratered in the polls as a result. And to a man and a woman, every single person I've talked to is like, yeah, there's no way, because we're Canadian first. There's no way we're going to vote for Pierre Poilievre. He's going to give away the farm. So that's been really, really encouraging. And yes, to your point, the weather here is lovely, Sam. Really.
Canada. Listen, it's good that Canadians are finding a lot of solace in the fact that they're woken up to with the threat from MAGA, but the MAGA threat continues in America, where it is full steam ahead for Donald Trump. We're going to be talking a lot today, and this is our number 5 story of the day, is about the constitutional crisis that may be upon us, in the fact that it seems that Donald Trump is just ignoring what a court has told him about a bunch of illegal immigrants that were being held now in El Salvador. They would be, well, of course, in the United States, but they were moved to El Salvador against a court order. And despite a very senior court ruling in D.C., they basically are still not being returned to America, where they should be, according to this one federal court judge. And that's one thing. I mean, that's a constitutional crisis on its own. But as you widen the lens here, and we've been reporting on Narativ, which is really important that everyone starts paying attention to, is the incoming Insurrection Act, which in 33 days, Donald Trump will get on his desk a report from his Homeland Security Secretary, and I believe his Attorney General, Pam Bondi. And they will tell him, what we believe they'll tell him, is that the Insurrection Act is okay to invoke the Insurrection Act along the southern border, which means for the first time in the history of the United States, we'll have U.S. troops guarding the border, and in a way that they've not done before. In other words, that whole southern border will be a operational zone, a military operations zone, which means that typical rights that are granted under the laws of the United States disappear. It now becomes basically martial law. And you can imagine what that's going to do to people concerned about future elections, people concerned about human rights, people concerned about people disappearing for no good reason. And it's going to set up a really difficult time as well. It's concerning Mexico, it's concerning Panama, anyone south of the border is concerned, because he's on this expansionist plan to build a North American empire, is Donald Trump. And is concerned that this really is just an excuse, like they did in Ukraine, to set this up as a staging area for attacks into the south, which is exactly what Putin did in Ukraine before he attacked Ukraine in 2022. So it's very troubling. And I know everyone's very concerned today about these particular undocumented workers that are in El Salvador, but this is a much, much bigger story. He is really setting the stage now, I believe, for the invocation of the Insurrection Act, which is maybe a month away.
Yeah, interesting, right? That old delightful relic from 1807, the Insurrection Act. It's what presidents dust off occasionally when they feel the urge to flex their muscle on domestic soil. And it's completely unnecessary. But to him, and he telegraphed this, and to his partners, and to MAGA, and to the authoritarian bent that is now running the United States, that whole religious aspect, this is must do. And the reason why it's must do, and it's fascinating, the reason why it's must do is because it allows them to do unspeakable things to human beings, right? Which is what they want to do. They want to send that message. This is a dictatorship. This is not a kakistocracy. This is a dictatorship where he surrounded himself with the worst people so he can get whatever results he wants for the people that are pulling his strings, namely Vladimir Putin, as we know. And the interesting part here is that we're having this conversation about the southern border, and the southern border, the conversation I had with the gentleman a couple months ago, was supposed to be a staging ground for some kind of invasion. That's why they named all the cartels terrorists. That's why they said it was a national emergency down at the border. That's why
they're calling it an invasion, right? It's not, they termed it an invasion so they can justify the Insurrection Act.
Yeah, it's an invasion. And it's not an invasion, by the way. It is the way it has always been at the southern border. They've had a bunch of other people come in over the past several years. And Donald Trump himself stopped that Border Security Act, if you remember, a couple of years ago, so that he could do this. This has been a plan of his and the Project 2025 team for some time. They have an expansionist ideal. They want to move into Mexico, and they will take it militarily. That is part of the plan. And where it gets really interesting in two different ways is A, telegraphing what goes on at the southern border, and then projecting it on the northern border. where they talk about forcibly taking Canada, which is where I live. It's where you live. It's where we earn a living. It's a hot commodity right now in the world of geopolitics because of where we are, who we are, what we have. And it's everything that the United States isn't and what they don't have. So that's their next expansionist goal. Those are the details that people aren't talking about today. But the Insurrection Act gives him the ability to literally militarize the United States of America. And not just people on either side of the border, but people in his own country that they deem to be a problem or a threat to the United States of America. And because of how powerful that order is, they can pick up anybody, like a young lady named Jasmine, who was an actress in American Pie, who spent 12 days, she's Canadian, 12 days in an ICE internment camp, sleeping on the concrete. 12 fucking days, a Canadian who just didn't have the proper paperwork and was told, this is how we're going to treat everybody that doesn't have the proper paperwork. So it's not just about you being an enemy. This is about you also not following their rules and them flexing muscle, them being able to tell the story about it. But the second part of this is why I find this very interesting, is there are 378 million people in the United States. 77 million people voted for that nominee. Almost every human being in that country owns a gun. So you got 300 million eligible gun owners who didn't vote for this guy, who, when they see this Insurrection Act gets triggered and they start feeling threatened, you better believe a civil war is on the menu in the United States. You better believe it.
Well, that's just a terrifying prediction. And I'm really interested in everything you've just said because it unpacked so much. But let's start with that threat to the north as well. I think you're absolutely right. This is an attempt by Donald Trump to build a North American empire that stretches all the way from Greenland to Canada, all the way down to Mexico, even as far south as the Panama Canal. It could be all those countries in between there. This is an expansionist empire builder, this guy. And he is telegraphing this not so subtly. I mean, we hear him talk about wanting to take Greenland and taking Greenland, as he says he will, by putting new soldiers there. He announced last week the 48 icebreakers that he's now bought for patrol of the Arctic waters. I mean, the Arctic waters don't really reach the United States except for Alaska. You don't need 48 icebreakers, but his expansionist plans are really about taking over Greenland and taking over Canada and patrolling those waters. And then, of course, using all the resources available to him at the Arctic to profit from, as you'll be doing with other parts of the world. So we're talking about a very, very expansionist plan. And for that reason, you need your complete control over the population. You need total control. And this is what this Insurrection Act is about. And for those people who feel like he's just doing things to other people right now, it's going to get closer and closer to you once this Insurrection Act is invoked, because it's just the way it is. History teaches this. It starts off as being the other people and the immigrants that get affected, but slowly but surely it's going to come closer and closer to your hometown, to your friends, to your people, to your companies, where it's just going to be your right to take it away one by one, and you are in a total police state. That is why there are so many people ringing the alarm right now about why isn't the protest movement starting yet. I mean, there's a lot of fear, and it's certainly protests happening in a lot of places. But there isn't a million people showing up at the White House lawn. And maybe that's because they're scared that Trump will be so dictator-like in his approach to that. But this is the way these things end. They don't really end unless the people tell Donald Trump they want it to end. And maybe they don't want it to end, and that's fine. If they don't want to protest, that's what it is. But on the other hand, if it doesn't start now, when will those protests begin? Not after the Insurrection Act is invoked in parts of the country. They'll just extend it everywhere else.
Yeah, and to that point, if you don't think, once someone takes your rights away, they're not giving them rights. So for Donald Trump and the Project 2025 team and all the maggots that are pining for this, including Mike Flynn, who tweeted, "It's time for martial law in the United States" earlier this morning, they're counting on the Insurrection Act being that lead up to martial law in the United States, which literally affects every single American. So off the bat, it's targeting every single citizen in the United States and all of their freedoms, because that's what the Insurrection Act does. It's McCarthyism on steroids. They can walk into an American's house and say, hey, we saw a tweet the other day that said, you support a country, or you hate Donald Trump, or you want Donald Trump to get sucker punched in the face. You're an enemy of the state. It could be your 14-year-old child. It could be your 90-year-old grandmother that has a fuck Trump hat on her head where she's taking a picture on her birthday because she's having a nice time with her family. ICE agents, the military will
come and get you. That is why he's doing this. And then, of course, think about what we just talked about, which is 300 million people that didn't vote for him, gun owners that didn't vote for him. That's a prelude. The Insurrection Act's a prelude to telling every single one of those people, you step out of line, our military will come for you. And I think the only hope that a lot of people here have is twofold. Americans today, I talked to two of them this afternoon, they're petrified. The hope that they have is A, that a judge is going to knock this down like he did with the Alien Act, which we instituted the other day. Judge knocked that down, but they ignored it anyway. I don't know if you know that. Trump ignored it and continued to send those people to El Salvador. Continue to keep those people.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. Look at this. It's an attack on America instantly by a guy who is completely captured by Vladimir.
And let's be really clear that they have a new social media algorithm that is running through all your social media accounts right now. It was reported the other day, and I haven't got the details in front of me, but there is a social media analysis that the government is now running on every single American. And they will assess whether you are loyal or not loyal based on your social media account right now. You have
social credit score, right? That's what they do in social credit.
But with political analysis, with real analysis of where you stand on the political scale. And if you imagine an Insurrection Act scenario where you've got all that information about every American. So when a policeman knocks on your door and says, and you try to tell them that you're not involved in whatever alleged acts of disloyalty they'll put against you, they can pull up your social media account and say, yeah, but on this day you tweeted this, on this day you suggested this to your friend and your DMs. And so they've got this entire record of everybody's political thinking. And it's going to become a very, very difficult period of time if this guy remains in power beyond these next 30 days. And I find it interesting that they just move on to story number 4 here, and I'll bump up number 3 to number 4 to see you following along. It seems unusual that you've got Donald Trump, who was accused basically of an insurrection by this committee, the Jan 6 committee, who is now going to invoke the Insurrection Act. Because he's going to invoke the Insurrection Act, which is why I think he's definitely going to do it, he's raising these pardons that Joe Biden issued, selectively pre-pardoning some of the members of the J6.
That was his Say Truth Social post this morning.
That's what that was about. So you were talking about that earlier on to me. So he puts on this truth post saying that there was an auto pen that Biden used to sign these pardons and that he didn't know what he was doing. It's not that he's really talking about. He's just trying to remove any association with the Insurrection Act. In order to do that, or the Jan 6 insurrection, in order to do that, he has to make these other guys who told everybody that he was involved in an insurrection look guilty and throw them in jail. So the whole process is about making him look innocent by turning the Adam Schiff and whoever into absolute criminals and throw them in jail by
targets of the Insurrection Act. I mean, that social post this morning was batshit crazy. It was pure dictator revenge, resentment. And if there's one thing that I've learned from guys like Adam Kinzinger, who put out a really cool video, he's like, fuck, right here. Like, go ahead and bring that Insurrection Act. Go ahead and come after me. And he called him fatso in one of the tweets, which made me laugh my ass up. So come get me. But this is, everything he does is about resentment. The most embarrassing thing in that man's life is the fact that he was found guilty and was going to be found guilty of inciting an insurrection and attempted coup of the United States. The other embarrassing part of that man's life is that he's a 34-time felon. He's been impeached twice. So he is just clearing the deck to go after every single political enemy, every single enemy of him, every single law-abiding citizen that did their job in prosecuting him, that tried to get to the bottom of what happened with the insurrection. That's also part of this Insurrection Act. He is literally taking what happened, what he did, and he's turning it around and he's weaponizing it in one of the most egregiously fucking transparently dictatory ways you'll ever see. This isn't just a heel turn. He's emboldened. He thinks he can do whatever he wants. And by and large, he has, right? Now we're watching him ignore any judicial decision that comes from any federal judge. We're seeing that now with the Alien Enemies Act. He's like, we're not going to pay attention to it. Tom Holman, the Homeland Security guy today on Fox News, he was like, we don't give a shit about what any judge says. We don't give a shit about the left. We don't give a shit about, well, we're coming for you. Mm-hmm. And looked at the camera and said it. And who is you?
Great question. You is anybody they don't like, that gets in their way, that Donald Trump doesn't like, anybody who's left, anybody who's trans, anybody who hates him, anybody who doesn't vote for him, anybody that says anything negative about him, any newspaper, any media outlet. Today, he basically told the people from NBC he's never going to talk to.
No.
And he's suing several different media outlets into submission. This is about submission to a dictator, period, stop.
Yeah, I mean, this is what happens when dictators take over. And you can go on if you want, because you're doing such a good job explaining to everyone why this is such a concerning issue. But we're seeing now the groundwork of what he's laying out. We've seen this Insurrection Act coming along, and we're seeing this attempt to really cancel everything that Joe Biden put in place in order to protect certain individuals. I mean, this is unheard of in American history, where you've got a current president just completely ignoring what a previous president has said and done and written, or pen or not.
Over the auto pen issue. And here's a quick little tidbit for you. Donald Trump, when he pardons 1,600 violent offenders who tried to take over.
Did he sign every one of those?
Auto pen, every single pardon. So literally those are pursued by that thinking. He's such a dumb fuck. It's crazy.
Yeah, and he doesn't give a shit because he'll just rewrite that history again. But the truth is that this is an illegal administration that's not following the law. I mean, you've got the Biden administration and Joe Biden signing legitimate pardons. And if he's not going to accept what they did with those pardons, he's not going to accept anything that they've done in the past. And that means that he's breaking the law. Those are laws that were written by Joe Biden.
Well, to be fair, Zev, he's starting to be said he is the law, and he can decide what the law is. Oh, there is that.
Yes, it's true. It's true that he says that, but it's also not legal. That it must be said that. We still have a constitution, although it seems to me every day that the constitution is just being ignored in every single way. And I mean, Americans need to wake up to this reality. It's not coming back. I mean, the constitution is being ripped up. It's being ignored by him on every level, in every direction. Once he has the legal framework like the Insurrection Act installed and other elements that he's putting in place, it's gone. I mean, there's no bringing that constitution back once it's completely annihilated, and he's ignoring the courts. This is his second sort of big attempt to ignore the courts. The first one is sidestepped, but this is happening now in real time. It looks like he's going to ignore the courts. That's a constitutional crisis, and it's not going to be something he turns away from. He indicated even before he became president that he was going to ignore the courts, and now he's doing it. So, sure.
Not just doing it, he's saying he's going to continue doing it. His proxies are saying they're going to continue to do it. And it's legitimately for one purpose. It's power, it's control. And he's making his way into being, he is a dictator, but he's making his way into what he thinks is some kind of kingship. Now, will it work? I don't know. I mean, you're seeing some pushback, you're seeing some protests. And I think the Insurrection Act would be a bit of a tipping point. You saw that in South Korea a few months ago, where the president of South Korea, who is really South Korean Trump, he did the same thing. Insurrection Act, which is martial law. He is now in jail because they do things right in South America.
Well, yeah, they do things right. And this is a later story, but it's worth talking about. Democrats failing to act effectively last week by supporting Donald Trump in the Senate in that reconciliation bill. This is your opportunity, Democrats. You want to fight something in 33 days. I'm telling you right now, Donald Trump is going to get something on his desk that says the Insurrection Act is legal and enforceable. You go ahead and do it. And in 33 days, the Democrats have an opportunity to do something. If they, again, allow him to get away with this, well, then it's America's fault, and it's the Democrats' fault, and it's everybody's fault. Really, you've got 33 days, plenty of time to arrange your protests, plenty of time to make sure that your leadership, especially Mr. Schumer in the Senate, is aware of the implications of this act, and that everyone stands united against this imposition of this act. We can't have the situation like we had last Friday, where even the Democrats are green-lighting this illegitimate government and their actions because it's hurting America in general. I mean, it's hurting the world, but I mean, most Americans, supposedly represented by these two parties, are not in agreement with this. So something is really wrong in the system if you have both parties supporting this reconciliation bill, and something will be really wrong in the system, fundamentally wrong, if the Insurrection Act is approved by both parties and not challenged by both parties.
Yeah, and you're seeing the Democrats' favor and fortune fold in front of you because of their lack of spine. You're seeing Chuck Schumer's nuts get clipped and put in the purse of Donald Trump, and you're seeing Chuck Schumer
now fully embarrassed, not show up for book signings because he supported the budget, supported this government, basically greenlighting, as you said, their ability to continue to enslave Americans, to hurt their international partners and allies around the world. It effectively was co-signing all of it when you give them that mandate, right? Like we're saying, you keep spending, keep going, tax cuts for the rich, bury the poor, martial law, Insurrection Act, putting people in internment camps. The Democrats are co-signing all that stuff, to your point. And their rating, their polling is never been lower. Like this week was a disaster because, to your point, Americans are asking where they are, and very few are even showing up.
Yeah, it's a real challenge, and you don't want to be completely catastrophic about this, but this could lead to a catastrophe in a way that World War II led to a catastrophe, that Hitler takeover of Nazi Germany led to a catastrophe on a human level that was quite severe. I mean, right now we're talking about legal precedent, and we're talking about whether people are being deported or not. It's very different than genocide. But genocide is where this kind of thinking leads you to, when your power gets so absolute and you're able to do things that are so horrendous and unthinkable, but because no one's got any mechanism of control around you, you're able to do it. And this is where we're heading, in my opinion, if we're not careful. These are the guardrails that the Constitution has built into the American system. If we take away the guardrails, if we take away the checks and balances, we take away the limits on power, we land up with too much power in one person's hand. And certainly this is a disastrous situation if you roll that out to the very end. We have the number, sort of originally, this is, I guess, what are we, number 2 now? I think we're number 2.
I thought we went to 5 and then 4, and I think maybe stalled on 3. Is this 2?
Oh, this could be 3. This could be 3. Who knows? We'll first
so we get to 0.
Yeah. So the 3 is related to everything we've been talking about, which is the shutdown of the VOA. Now, this is a terrible thing. What's going on really, along with the things you said earlier on about journalists being sued and media outlets being sued, is now the shutdown of the Voice of America, which most people here would not have heard of, but I know have heard of but never heard. When I know growing up in South Africa, the VOA, when we were living under a state rule in South Africa, the Voice of America was where I got a lot of information from, because it was reliable and it was independent and it was broadcasting on strong enough transmitters on the shortwave frequencies, believe it or not, way back then. But we were getting the news. That's how we got the news, was from Voice of America. And here we are again, the United and Radio Free Europe as well. It's another one of the American-funded institutions that are being pulled out because of Donald Trump. These are institutions that are so important to freedom around the world, but also, whereas America becomes more and more of an autocratic state, who is going to fill that void? Who is going to fill the void of where independent journalism can happen, feeding into America as well now? Because it's very difficult to see a world without any independent media. He is making it impossible for independent journalists to operate. He's taking control over the White House pool. He's taking control over the entire ecosystem in terms of labeling some people as being illegal. I don't know how he determines it, but MSNBC, illegal. CNN, illegal. You can't just do that, but he's doing it. So
and he's doing it. To your point, the state of media is petrification. I mean, people are petrified. And 2 things that he did prior to being inaugurated, and you saw it at his inauguration, is he cozied up to the people that control how you get all of that. Doesn't matter where it comes from, right? So Mark Zuckerberg signs an agreement with Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg comes out. It's like, I'm going to get rid of fact checking, and I'm just going to support Donald Trump's America. That's what I'm going to do. And then, of course, we know he partnered with Elon Trump, who's really the president of the United States. So they own Twitter, they own Facebook, they own Meta, they own Instagram. They actually own TikTok right now, and he gets to decide who gets it. So controlling information warfare, that's how he's really done this. And he's done this because he's appealed to the interests of the Broligarchy. And he's basically said to them, hey, listen, I'll give you anything you want. All I need is for you to do my bidding all the fucking time. So there's that part of it. So he controls how you get information. Now what he's doing is he's sending the fear of God into mainstream media outlets, people at Comcast, NBC, MSNBC, CBS, every single CNN, every single legacy media outlet. He's either threatened, told they're fake news, tried to embarrass them in public, refuses to answer their questions, calls them the enemy of their people. So he's sowed all kinds of doubt. And now he's suing them. Now he's going after them Now with the Insurrection Act, going back to that old goody, he can basically say, hey, listen, you're an enemy of the state. We're taking your license away. We're going to shut you down. Do you know how many publicly traded companies own media outlets? They're all publicly traded, especially the big ones.
Yeah,
And
businesses, big businesses.
Huge businesses. You could say they're in decline, but dude, that's one thing. That is this, as you tie all this stuff together, the media aspect that the right has truly captured. I'm part of this DM group of a bunch of really smart guys, they're muckrakers that, like to talk about who needs a shit kicking in the atmosphere and who doesn't. One of the things that we were talking about in our group today, Zev, that I thought was fascinating. I'd love your thoughts on this. Is for the last 20 years, conservative interests in both Canada and the United States have really, really, really captured ownership of all the major media outlets. And it's been by design. Like Chatham Asset Management, the U.S. hedge fund, we've talked about them, owned by David Pecker, buddies with Donald Trump. They own more newspapers in Canada than any other organization. And you see it daily. And they've been working at this plan for 15, 20 years. Now, if you look at all the biggest influencers online, none of them are centrist or left-leaning or progressive. They are all right-leaning and they are fucking crazy. Nick Fuentes, Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan. They don't
hate to do it.
Yeah, they don't have a comparable on the other side of that equation because the oligarchy makes sure of that. Like, this isn't just conspiracy. These are facts. I'm not pulling stuff out of my ass just to get people all angry that the oligarchy and mainstream media and Donald Trump really own it all. And it's not a conspiracy.
They really do that. They really,
ownership, all that stuff. This is how it works. Jesse Waters said it on Fox the other day. Here's how we do it. This is a grassroots military movement. We've been at this for years. And so, to your point, I think you're going to see a capitulation on behalf of every mainstream media outlet. They will bend the knee to Donald Trump to keep their license, especially if he hits that Insurrection Act trigger. You'll see guys doing podcasts like this literally get shut down because that's what the Insurrection Act in the digital age can do too. Shut them down. Why? Insurrection, presidential. Shut that person down. Go get Zev Shaleb. Throw him in jail. Anybody that says anything bad about Elon Musk, throw them in jail. Anybody that says anything bad about Donald Trump, throw them in jail. Like the media isn't just in trouble. We're entering into a time and an age where you can literally look at the United States, China, and Russia and go, they're the same. Yeah. They're the same. That is how it works in those countries.
This is how it was growing up in South Africa. You couldn't even have a conversation with any more than 3 people. It was considered a political gathering. If you had a conversation with more than 3 people. No way. Which could be your family. And if you're discussing politics with a gathering of more than 3 people and you said something that was opposed to the national government, you could be thrown in jail. So imagine that in terms of an independent media. You had absolutely no control over what the truth was. You just had to accept that you were giving a completely weird, artificial news narrative every day over the state government, airwaves. And there was barely any independent media that came around. The only independent media that did come around was this one radio station I worked for, this Radio 702 in South Africa, broadcast from an independent homeland, from Botswana. And because of a loophole in the law that the South Africans had set up these independent homelands with broadcast rights, we were able to broadcast into Johannesburg and Pretoria as free agent. We didn't have the censors and we didn't have the censorship. And we were an American-style radio station that was able to bring you the truth. And it is one of the things I'm convinced until this day that was able to chip away at the reality. Because even though it didn't have the biggest audience, the state still controlled the bulk of the audience, it had enough of the audience to influence enough influential people. And that's why things like VOA, that's why things like the European Radio Free Europe are so important. For the same reason, it doesn't matter if you hit everybody, but if you get enough people who become the truth sayers within their communities, become leaders within their communities who are able to spread the word internally of what's really happening, you can change the entire trajectory of a country. And with this information being so important right now, as the force that is controlling all these countries, it is so vital that there are independent broadcasters out there coming from spaces that aren't controlled
by authoritarian governments. It's one of the reasons I'm setting up this narrative network, and I've been talking about this sort of voice of freedom idea to set up a network or a TV operation outside of the United States, maybe from here, from Toronto, where we can beam the truth into America, because America is no longer going to be able to report the truth. And I'm really interested in
Voice of America, dude. We're the voice of America. We're here for our American friends. We're here for 300 million people that didn't vote for that sack of shit. And you'll get 200 a tip from us too. Just so you know.
And for the truth. I mean, at the end of the day, someone's going to be telling the truth to Americans, because people could be dying in neighboring towns, in neighboring cities. People could be hauled away to concentration camps. You never hear about that. If no one is telling you the truth, you're never going to find out. And this is certainly the story out of South Africa that I can attest to. Probably is exactly what happened in Nazi Germany. And so you and I are both discussing this idea, and we really want anyone who's interested in suggesting ideas or volunteering, if you're a professional in this world as a journalist or a creative person, or if you want to help fund it, reach out to me at next, NEXT at narrative.org. That's next at narrative, NARATIV.org, and help us set this up, because America really needs an unfettered free media telling them what's going on. And if it has to be over shortwave radio, we'll do it, but hopefully we can keep it digital and keep it on digital as well.
We've done this, 3-4 times now, the 5 Stack, which I absolutely love doing, because it's a chance to stay sharp, talk about some really important about what the truth is and what's at stake. We started with like 30, 40 people watching. Then the next one, there was like 60, 70 people. There's a couple hundred people watching this, and we're pouring. And it speaks to the hunger that people have to know what's going on, because algorithms, as they work, people are only getting different versions of reality, and most of those versions of reality that are living in those algorithms are not real, specifically in Trump's version of this algorithmic reality. So there's that. And I think anybody listening can do everybody a favor, just get everybody to subscribe to both your Substack and my Substack. These are things that we write about. These are things that we talk about. We're trying to assemble a larger group of people to be part of this NAFO movement, North Fellows organization, where we come together because we love what we do, and we love the people that we talk to, and we love democracy, and we like the truth, and we like to have some fun talking about it, because it's a very serious time. So yeah, any way people can support our Substacks, any way that people can share this link with their friends, we greatly appreciate it, because I think this is something we might start doing daily. Yeah. I know you're busy, but like the fire hose of bullshit, and trying to calm people down, and trying to get people motivated, and trying to get people to, in a somewhat entertaining way, really try to understand that Canadians and Americans, we've been in love with each other for a couple hundred years, and we know this isn't America. I know that from my perch in Canada. I know the people in the United States are beautiful people. I'm watching them in the comments section right now saying, thank you. No, thank you. Thank you for being the spine of that country, and being real Americans and real Democrats, and people who truly do love the process of democracy, and these two countries that have had this beautiful arrangement for so long and supported each other for so long. I mean, Canada has gone to war for the United States 5 times. The United States, despite what Donald Trump has been saying, us being useless without their military, they've never gone to war with us, ever once. We've never even asked us. We've never even placed a phone call saying, hey, we need some military support. The United States has done it 5 times, and 5 times Canada has sacrificed and paid the ultimate sacrifice. And we will continue to, but not for him. And so what's at stake is that relationship as well. And you having a very strong American audience, and myself with a very strong Canadian audience, it's going to be really nice to try to bring people together to try to understand what's going on and coordinate on both sides, and really have some fun doing it. So to your point, yeah, I mean, this has never been more important for independent media to stick together, and for us to be able to do this from Canada into the United States for our American friends, so that we can tell them we still love them. We're still proud of our relationship. We know that guy needs to go, and we want to help you with that in any way we can.
It really is like a breakup that we're all enduring a little bit. It's very difficult. And I don't know if Americans feel it as harsh as Canadians do, or smaller, but there is a real feeling of betrayal, and there's a real feeling of needing to break up. And whatever comes along with that, there's the stages of denial, there's the stages of acceptance, there's the stages of just fuck you. We're probably in the fuck you stage still, but I think people are coming around to this idea that American people are also trapped. American people are stuck in this. They have been invaded. They've been taken over. And you can't be angry at Americans. You got to love Americans, because we always have. and be angry at the regime and keep the love affair with Americans going. And together, I think the populations of both these countries are ultimately going to be able to hold back the enemy, which is really the enemy of democracy. Now, this goes into it pretty well, which is that we are expecting a call for, I think you said this to me earlier on, an election call in Canada as early as Friday. Potentially, the new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, is in Europe, breaking up with America, as it were. Tell us what's going on.
Yeah, he's speed dating.
Yeah. We're sort of trying to find his exes and say, hey, are you still available? Are you still single? Because I am.
Hey, France, sorry about the whole Quebec thing.
I'm single now. I'm all yours.
We're our dance card is wide open, and you have Raphael fighters and a whole bunch of fucking time on it. Yeah, it's interesting because Mark Carney, obviously, he ascended as the Liberal leader, which means he gets to be the Prime Minister because Justin Trudeau stepped away. That has come with this incredible unity movement thanks to Trump. I think now Mark Carney has like a 25-point lead. Mark Carney over Pierre Poilievre. The Liberal Party has like a 10-point lead over the Conservative Party. That's a swing of about 40 percentage points in the past 6 weeks. So thank you, Trump, to your point. Thank you, America, because you're saving Canada. You don't even know it. But what's interesting is the arguing that I see from the alt-right, hard-right conservative, because we've got Maple MAGA up here for all my friends in the United States. Our conservative party's the GOP. They're really fucking bad at it, though. And the leader's this guy named Pierre Poilievre, who is just a colossal waste of time. He's like the Temu version of Trump. We call him Temu Trump, Skinny Trump, Dollar Store Trump. And he's in trouble because that kind of populism doesn't work up here. It's fun to tinker with. It's fun to play footsies with as a country when you hate your prime minister. And this country did hate Justin Trudeau because disinformation was a thing. He is performative. He really wasn't interested in the business of Canada. So Business Canada really gave him the cold shoulder. But to that point, the argument is that Mark Carney isn't an elected official, which is true. And he needs to be an elected official to be a prime minister, which is not true. This happened several times. John Turner, William Lyon Mackenzie King 3 times. So there's this movement for people to say, hey, listen, he needs to be legitimately elected to be the prime minister, which he doesn't. But Mark Carney, because he's a fucking good dude and he does things above board and he is not a political guy. He's a rules-based guy. He's a former governor of the Bank of Canada, former governor of the Bank of England. He's got a sterling resume. He's involved in several international organizations that really make sure that we stay liquid. He saved Ireland from pure bankruptcy just because he was doing nothing on a Saturday. Like, that's how qualified this man is to lead the business of a country. And he could probably outrun this. Like, he could probably say to Canadians, hey, listen, wartime measures. He could do what Trump's doing. Wartime measures, unity government, emergency act, but he's not. And what he's doing is he's going to give the people a chance to give him that mandate, which is really, really, really important to the unity of this country at the moment. And there are a lot of people that don't want it. And I'm one of those people that's like, if you look at what democracy is all about, it's probably a good idea for him to run, win a seat, get elected, then start an election. But what he's going to do is call a general election and say, let the chips fall where they may. You want Pierre Poilievre, Temu Trump, a guy who just ran populism and DEI and anti-trans and sex down people's throats, a guy who lies 34 times a day in the House of Commons, effectively the biggest piece of shit to ever grace the hallways of the House of Commons in this country? Or do you want me? And I'm going to leave that to you. I'm going to leave that to the Canadian people. And at a time when we're really fraught with concern over that dictator in the United States and his plans to militarily force Canada into statehood, the timing, I don't think, could be better. And I think it's a really strategically smart decision for Mark Carney as well to say, okay, we're going to do this the right way. I need a mandate from you. And if he wins, and he will, because he's an adult, Pierre Poilievre is not, a lot like Donald Trump. If and when he wins, he will have a mandate to bring all of those pieces together and have some kind of unity government as we head into the next 4 years with this dickhead to the south. So there's lots of jostling, but at the same time, he is the perfect man for this moment, much like Churchill was the perfect man for that moment, to the point where the first thing he did was fly to France, which is where he is now, just finished a meeting with France,
where they came up with a coalition of the willing, several countries, including Australia, New Zealand, Canada, a bunch of EU countries, 35 in total, 10,000 troops on the ground in Ukraine. They are going to make sure the skies are patrolled, and they are not even going to bother presenting it to Trump. And that's the other thing I love about this guy. Not only did he go over there to secure that security agreement for Ukraine, he's securing a security partnership with the UK and Ukraine. Security partnership with Ukraine to help us as we help them. Same thing.
Important, yeah.
Because there's nobody better with drones than Ukraine. I mean, we see it. And is securing another deal with the UK, Sweden, and Finland. So when he comes back in 2 days, he's then going directly to the Arctic, to your point, to then start planning how Canada protects our sovereign Arctic land. Now, that's a dude that took this seriously from the second he put his hand on that Bible and swore an oath to protect this country. And this is what Canadians are seeing. And to that point, watching people in this province that I'm in right now walk around and go, yeah, we got to vote for the guy. We don't have a choice.
Yeah. I mean, I still think that some of the polls are showing you that Poilievre still has a very decent chance at winning at least a minority. But I don't see it. I don't see it happening. And I agree with you.
He lost 40 points.
Yeah, no,
it's 40 points in almost every seat in 6 weeks. Yeah. The election will be till April.
Yeah, he's not going to win. I mean, I hope. The one thing I will say is the one thing that concerns me is the disinformation, and I keep seeing it. I see the carnage, really, if you want to put it that way, on X every day. They put out so much shit about him every day, and I worry so much about the effect of that disinformation really hurting Carney's chances. We saw it with Kamala Harris. We saw it with Biden. But that machine that X has built is very powerful, and they know how to use it and know how to target certain audiences. And they know the feed you're getting and the feed I'm getting may be different from the feed someone else is getting. If they're trying to tweak them, if they're trying to push them over the edge, if they know where their leans are. So I'm still cautious. I'm really optimistic that Carney's doing everything he's doing. I'm so glad he's doing this European trip, and I'm so glad there is a security agreement. And I'm so glad he's reaching out to Ukraine. And I think at the end of the day, this is the kind of stuff that makes the stuff of legend and the stuff that makes Canada from a 78 country to a world superpower. This is how it happened. But it's going to take some real fine tuning on the election front. It's going to take some Canadians really tuning out X, or maybe even banning X as we spoke, or at least the election period, or for 3 days leading into the election. There's no reason. The Germans did this. They just turned off X. Yeah, I think so. I think so. I'm going to double check that, but someone told me the other day that for 3 days leading up to the election, they turned off X, or you had to give equal time or some really strict rules, whatever. But they made X not a factor in recent elections. And I'm going to make sure exactly what they did. And certainly Canada should follow that rule. We should get to the number one story, which ties into everything we've been talking about, which is Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump are tomorrow going to be sitting down in a phone call to basically figure out how they're going to divide the spoils of war in Ukraine. They figure out how they're going to divide the assets. I mean, I don't know. They talk about this like it's some sort of like business or divorce or something. It's
hundreds of thousands of people. We're going to divvy it up.
Yeah, millions of people have died, or at least a million. And yet Donald Trump is still on Putin's side. There's just no way about it. Donald Trump has forced the Ukrainians out of part of Russia that they had invaded. You don't need any more clear evidence that Donald Trump is Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin is Donald Trump. And now he's playing it out on the world stage. And how embarrassing for the United States that their incredible reputation and brand is being sullied by this ridiculous Manchurian candidate that is now doing everything that Vladimir Putin wants him to do. Nevertheless, that call is going to go ahead. It's going to have impact. And Ukrainians are not on that call. Vladimir Zelensky, not on there. He's not going to be part of that conversation to help defend or at least argue for what he thinks the Americans should be doing, which is sad and really tragic for those people who lost so many people in that war.
Yeah, it is, especially if you look at some of the visuals early on, what happened in Bucha, the massacre in neighborhoods. I think 30,000 children have been kidnapped. Another 30,000 have been kidnapped, like children, but adults. The egregious stories that I've heard from international criminal court documenters like my friend Alistair Barkov about what they did to women and children in basements over the course of this war, what they continue to do to other human beings, attacking civilian infrastructure, not just infrastructure, going after hospitals, going after apartment buildings, going after shopping centers, double tapping those places after emergency crews show up. Just some context for a guy who's only concerned, and he's not concerned about stopping the war. He's concerned about enriching himself and other people with the spoils of war, to your point. The fact that he even talked, and has continued to talk over the last 4 years to Vladimir Putin is all we need to know about why he's there. He's only there because Vladimir Putin put him there. And so you've watched Ukraine battle so effectively, so beautifully. So it was supposed to be 3 days, is now 3 years. And they have Russia on the verge of a collapse, like of a military collapse, of a socioeconomic collapse, a banking collapse. Like, it's over in Russia. You can't buy eggs, you can't buy bread. They're rounding 16-year-olds up at MMA training centers and just sending them to the front lines. They're begging Korea for more cannon fodder. Like Ukraine has them on the mat. And so the optics that you see about these phone calls, and I think it's important that people realize this, is that they don't own, Russia and the United States don't own the end of this war. Ukraine does. Ukraine will continue to fight. It doesn't matter what happens on that phone call with Putin and Trump tomorrow. Ukraine and its partners, France, England, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Turkey is now fully behind, Lithuania, Poland, Finland. I mean, that army itself, it's twice as big as anything that Vladimir Putin can put into that country. And now with these security agreements, knowing that they're not, the coalition of the willing isn't just open to sending troops in, they're planning on it. They're planning on a peacekeeping mission, which could get violent. Opens up one door, which World War III, that door is not a fun one to open. Think about it, right? Pouring different assets and countries into one state, and they all fight there. That's World War III. That's what we're talking about. But the other part of this is that Ukraine, I've had conversations with people over there, like, we don't really want anybody's help. We'll work with Europeans, we'll work with Canada, infrastructure, but we'll fight this ourselves. We just need stuff. We need other stuff. But the game changer are people. They're soldiers, they're troops. It's boots on the ground, because then all bets are off. And I don't know that Donald Trump, like, we put a lot into these phone calls. We put a lot into the idea that Trump and Putin are going to meet and just carve up Europe. Europe's resolve has never been stronger. Europe's resolve, Ukrainians resolve, Ukraine's resolve, the resolve of the New Zealand, UK, Australia coalition is the 4 eyes, not the 5 anymore, by the way. The United States have.
Not official now. It's the 4 eyes.
Yeah, it's the 4 eyes now.
Oh. I think what you're saying, I mean, you talk about World War III and the specter of World War III, and I think the reality of it is we are in the prelude to that. I know people don't like to talk about that, but the reality of it is if Donald Trump and Elon Musk stay in power in the United States, this war will not be over until that country is liberated. I mean, the truth of it is there's a lot of people, 300 plus million people, who are sitting there under the control of an illegitimate government that is going to get more illegitimate by the day. They continue to ramp up all these efforts like the Insurrection Act, and that country needs to be liberated. That's what the world has done. You talk about Europe's resolve, and, America likes to stand up and call itself the beacon of democracy, the beacon of freedom around the world, but it came from France. They gave democracy to the United States.
Benjamin Franklin literally went to France and begged them for months, please give it so we can take out the British. It was funny because Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, she was asked about France and their strong support for Ukraine. And Caroline Leavitt today said, maybe you should ask France that what if they'd be speaking German if it wasn't for Americans.
Yes.
And I do want to point out that the Americans had the least to do with the liberation of France. The UK did, Canada did. There you go. And the French resistance did.
Yeah.
That's who liberated. The Americans were Johnny come lately, way too late to the thing. And they only got in there because the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. So, profiles in courage in the United States Army, they're not sympathetic.
Yeah, I think you're so right about all of this stuff. And it's such a good point. And the resistance, there's a resistance down there. And people on the chat here are saying, please help us. Americans are in distress and Americans need help and they're scared and they don't necessarily know what to do. And they are going to need help from the outside world to liberate their own country. And in in that way, there's going to need to be a resistance inside America. There's going to be a little bit unconventional. There's not going to be the resistance of 2016. It's going to be a resistance. Because I think at the end of the day, this is where we're heading into. People need to really start thinking about how they form local communities and understand the strengths and weaknesses of each community and the fortifications of each community and the defense structures of each community, and start playing the same kind of role that the French resistance played in the Second World War, the Belgian resistance played in the Second World War. These were very effective organizations. They really helped stop the Nazis from their approach across Western Europe. And this is reality. Unfortunately, this is where we are right now. I'd like to be able to tell us all that we're in a different path, but we're not. This is the truth of it is. With this Insurrection Act, I think it's a death knell for American civil rights. And I think American free elections die with the Insurrection Act. If it's invoked next month. I think when you're seeing these conversations around the free press and you're seeing these comments about making certain media illegal, I mean, you know what that leads to: no free press, no freedom, and certainly no democracy. And so we're seeing all the signs now. You're no longer dealing with a country that is a free country. And in that regard, the world's going to have to help liberate America. There's no other way around it.
Yeah, and it's such a great point. But Americans can start trying to liberate America too, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that we don't give enough credit to people when they get fed up, especially Americans when they get fed up, right? Mm-hmm. And again, fair-minded people who understand statistics and understand cause and effect understand that 77 million people voted for him and 300 million did not. Now, of those 300 million that did not, collectively, there's about 210 million guns in those hands in the United States. 210, maybe more. About 2 guns per person when it comes to the gun total in the United States, just over 2 guns per person. And you also take into account that Canadians, Mexicans, it's not a foregone conclusion that if the United States decides to take this Insurrection Act and turn this into the ability to hurt people, to attack people with their own military, we're not just going to fucking sit around. And Americans aren't just going to sit around. And Mexicans aren't just going to sit around and go, oh, well, it's America. There's nothing we could do. No, ways. Every single, like Malcolm Nance, who's such a great follow. He's a incredibly smart guy. Malcolm Nance was like, he'd be so stupid to attack America. Canada would destroy them. The topography, the citizen armies that you would see pop up in this country, and trust 40 million people would be interested in fighting for the sovereignty of this country. Same thing with the 100 million or so in Mexico. Like this isn't a cakewalk, but it's also not, he's not postulating. He means it. And he thinks that he can do this. And it's really fucking wild to me when we sit and have this conversation, because I feel like a conspiracy theorist, because we're going down this road.
But we're going down.
Insurrection Act, Alien Act, deportation, detention centers, threats, military threats, legitimately abandoning all of its allies, voting with pariah states at NATO, taking themselves out of the International Criminal Court, out of who. These are all signs.
Even
accountable for any of it.
The Social Security